All right, well, thank you. Glad that everyone is here. It's now 10 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. All right, good morning and welcome, everyone. I want to ask, first of all, that everyone please turn our cell phones to silent. And just a few notes, you may notice board members today accessing their laptops, phones, or other devices during the meeting. They are using the devices solely to access the board meeting materials that are in electronic format. We also will have a designated time on the agenda for public comment and ask for public comment on each agenda item. I ask that you be respectful of the need to conduct the board's business. This meeting is available via teleconference. Individuals listening to the meeting will have an opportunity to provide public comment and will be assisted by a moderator who will be facilitating the teleconferencing process. For those members of the public participating via teleconference, please wait until the moderator has introduced you before making your comments. Each person will be limited to 3 minutes per agenda item. The board welcomes public comment on any item on the agenda, and it is the board's intent to ask for public comment prior to the board taking action on any agenda item. If for some reason I forget to ask for public comment on an agenda item and you wish to speak on that item, please raise your hand and you will be recognized. Today's meeting will run according to the Open Meeting Act as required by law. We plan to end today by 4 p.m. First of all, before we start, I would like to introduce our Executive Officer, Gregory Pruden.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here.
Quick introduction. Now, I would like to call the meeting to order and ask that Secretary Linden please call the roll.
Okay, Dr. Bragg,
Present.
Member Clemens, Member Dawson,
Present.
Member Kleppa,
Present.
Member Linden is present, Dr. Pruitt,
Here.
Member Sims,
Present.
Member Sue,
Here.
Dr. Garcia,
Present.
and Dr. Wong.
Present.
So we have a quorum.
All right, thank you. We have a quorum. Let's go ahead and move on to item agenda number 2, public comments on items not on the agenda. The board welcomes public comment on any item not on the agenda. The board will extend 3 minutes to any speaker to speak on any topic that is not already before the board for discussion today. Are there any members of the public who wish to offer comment? And there are no hands raised in the meeting room.
All right, then we are going to open up for public comment via WebEx. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial-in users, dial *3 to raise a hand. And for our mobile device users, you may need to hit the ellipses button. That's the ... at the bottom in order to find your hand. There are 3 different pages and only one of them has that hand button, so you may need to cycle through it. As stated before, you'll be given 3 minutes to speak, and I'll give you a 30-second warning before your time expires. We're going to wait just a few more seconds to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue with the agenda?
Yes, please. Thank you. Let's go ahead and move on to item number 3, which is discussion and possible approval of minutes from our February 16th, 2024 board meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to the February 2024 minutes from the board members? Oh, February 16th, sorry. And there are no comments from our board members. Can I, Mr. Moderator, if you could check online for us?
We are open for public comment on the meeting minutes. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial-in users, dial *3. And for our mobile device users, if you're having trouble finding that hand, hit the ellipses button. That's the ... at the bottom. We're going to take a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue with the minutes?
Yes, please. I need to do audience too. Sorry, I also forgot to ask if there's any public comment from those in the audience. There are no hands raised in the hearing room. I do need a motion to approve the minutes from our February 16th, 2024 meeting.
Moved.
Alex makes the motion. Can I get a second?
I second the motion.
Okay. I don't have any more comments. Ms. Linden, if you could do a roll call vote, please.
Okay, the motion to approve the meeting minutes was made by Member Clemens, seconded by Dr. Bragg. Okay, Dr. Bragg,
Aye.
Member Clemens,
Aye.
Member Dawson,
Aye.
Member Kleppa,
Aye.
Member Linden, aye. Dr. Pruitt,
Aye.
Member Sims,
Aye.
Member Sue,
Aye.
Dr. Garcia,
Abstain, was not present.
okay, and Dr. Wong.
Aye. Okay, so motion passes. All right, let's go ahead and move on to item agenda number 4. Discussion and possible action on the Department of Consumer Affairs update. We have Melissa Gear from the DCA Executive Office and Debbie Shaw and Harmony DeFilippo from the DCA Budget Office. Welcome.
Hello and good morning, President Huang, Vice President Garcia, Executive Officer Pruden, and members of the board. I'm Melissa Gear, Deputy Director for Board and Bureau Relations, and I appreciate the opportunity to share the Department of Consumer Affairs update this morning. Before I begin my update, I'd like to take a moment to congratulate and welcome Member Martin Dawson to the board and congratulate Member Sandra Sims on her reappointment to the board. Thank you both for your service and commitment to protect California's consumers. Likewise, I'd like to thank the board and its staff for their service. Although Public Service Recognition Week has ended, DCA recognized over 3,000 DCA board and bureau employees who work to protect California consumers. DCA appreciates all employees and board members' service and contributions to consumer protection. Second, on April 30th, DCA hosted an in-person meeting with Secretary Tamika Moss and executive leaders. It served as an opportunity for DCA leaders to meet our new secretary and hear her vision and priorities for the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency and the department. Next, DCA has learned of a recent increase in scams targeting licensees. Though the nature of the scams varies, they are similar in that they involve individuals falsely identifying themselves as board employees and telling the licensee they are under investigation. The scammers attempt to gather personal and/or financial information and may even demand payment. Boards are urged to be vigilant and proactive in providing licensees with tips on avoiding scams. In addition, on April 5th, 2024, DCA's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, also referred to as DEI Steering Committee, held its quarterly meeting. The committee reviewed and discussed the member application process, establishing subcommittees, and solicited input from the committee on how to expand language access, workforce development, and advance DEI in 2024. The next committee meeting will be held on July 26th. If you have ideas you'd like the committee to consider, please let your executive officer know. As a reminder, DCA's learning management system has many DEI-related training courses available. Board members are encouraged to participate in available trainings and continue to grow in their DEI efforts. Furthermore, last month, DCA's Office of Public Affairs staff participated in 2 Facebook Live events hosted by the Consulate of Mexico's Sacramento and Fresno offices during its Financial Education Week. Staff presented Get to Know DCA in Spanish and shared a broad overview of consumer and licensing information. In addition, DCA joined an in-person resource event with the Consulate of Mexico in Sacramento. Another Get to Know DCA virtual event was held with the Consulate of Mexico in San Bernardino on May 14th. The consulates have expressed interest in future event partnerships to share even more licensing and consumer resources. Additionally, in the coming months, DCA will be developing workforce development outreach opportunities for all boards and bureaus to participate in. I look forward to sharing more information soon. As we look ahead, please keep the following information in mind. As the fiscal year comes to an end, please submit your travel expense claims, or TECs, as soon as possible and no later than Wednesday, June 7th, 2024. Claims submitted after this date will still be processed. However, the State Controller's Office will not issue payments until after July 5th. All travel expenses and advances submitted for travel on or after July 1st will be processed for payment after the budget is signed. For questions regarding travel claims, please contact Board and Bureau Relations. Also, as a reminder, board members must complete BMont within 1 year of their appointment or reappointment. BMont will be offered virtually on June 18th and again on October 22nd. Members can register for their training via LMS. And lastly, now that the annual Form 700 filing period has ended, DCA and BBR would like to thank all of our board members and executive officers for helping us to achieve nearly 100% compliance. Again, thank you for this opportunity to join you today. I'm happy to answer any questions from the board at this time. And if you need any further information on anything that has been said today, please feel free to reach out to Board and Bureau Relations. Thank you.
Are there any comments from any board members? Well, thank you very much. And now it's going to be Harmony. And now we have Debbie Shaw and Harmony DeFilippo from the DCA Budget Office. Welcome.
Just real quick, members and members of the public, Debbie Shaw is our new budget analyst. So we want to give a warm welcome to her. Thanks for being here today.
Can I be heard by everyone? Beautiful, thank you. Thank you, President Wang and the members of the board. Good morning, my name is Debbie Shaw and I'm a budget analyst with the DCA Budget Office. And with me today is Budget Manager Harmony DeFilippo. I want to thank the board and the executive staff for allowing me a few minutes to present on Agenda Item 4B, the board's expenditure projections and fund condition statement. First, I'm going to start with the board's expenditures agenda, item 4BI, page 1 of your materials. These projections are based on actual data through fiscal month 9. This report includes fiscal year 22-23 actual expenditures marked in green, as well as fiscal year 23-24 budgeted and projected expenditures marked in blue and orange. As we move to the end of the document, you will see the board had a beginning balance budget of approximately $4.1 million and is projected to spend a total of $2.82 million, creating a reversion to the board's fund of a little over $1.3 million, a reversion percentage of approximately 32%. The next document I will be going over is the board's revenues projections. This is page 2 of your materials. This report includes receipts collected through March and projected revenue through the end of the year. I will go further into the projections as we transition into the next slide. The next slide is the board's fund condition statement, page 3 of your materials. As a reminder, we read this document top to bottom, left to right. The left column is the board's prior year, fiscal 22-23 actuals. It shows the board began fiscal year 22-23 with an adjusted beginning balance of $2.077 million. Collected $2.564 million in revenues, with $346,000 from initial licensing fees, $2.64 million from license renewals, and $154,000 was collected from the issuance of citations, fines, delinquent fees, and other revenues. The board expended $2.9 million, which includes $197,000 in direct draws to the fund for statewide pro rata and pension payments. The board ended fiscal year 22-23 with $1.732 million reserve balance, or about 6.9 months in reserve. For the current year 23-24, the board projects revenues of 2.6 million, with approximately 344,000 projected from initial licensing fees, at 2.109 million from renewal fees, 217,000 from the issuance of citations, fines, delinquent fees, and other revenues. The board's 23-24 expenditures based on the governor's budget with FM9 projections and is just over $3 million between 2.7 in authorized expenditures and 231,000 in direct draws to the fund, leaving the board with a fund balance of just over 2.6 million, or 7.2 months in reserve. The Budget Office will continue to monitor the board's revenue and expenditures and report back to the board with monthly expenditure projections as we continue to close fiscal months in the current fiscal year. A few things to note of the board's fund condition. The fund condition is a snapshot in time. One of the main factors driving expenditure increases in future years is a result of personal service adjustments. These include general salary increases, as well as employee compensation and retirement rates adjustments. The Budget Office includes a conservative ongoing 3% increase to expenditures on the fund condition statement to account for these ongoing incremental adjustments. Lastly, I would like to note to the board that any future legislation or unanticipated events could result in the board's need for additional resources, which could create cost pressure on the fund. The board has done an excellent job of being fiscally responsible with this budget. We will continue to monitor the board's fund and provide updates to the board on a regular basis. Again, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to present at today's meeting, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I'm having a little trouble following the math under months in reserve. The numbers, I'm sure they make sense, but they don't line up to me necessarily. Can you tell me what what the numerator and the denominator are on those? I can see one of them, but not the other, so I don't know the basis for it.
So the calculate,
Green button, yeah.
sorry. Hi. So the calculation's actually a formula and it looks at the revenue collected. It also looks at the prior year ending. So there's several pieces that are built into that formula of how we determine the months in reserve.
Is that something you can share at a later time? I don't need you to pull out any
Yeah,
notes right now.
I can provide that information to
Thank
Greg
you.
so he can get that for you. Absolutely.
Not seeing any other questions from members, I just want to point out for perhaps the benefit of our new members, you do see on this fund condition it going negative. But that negative is based off of the assumption, if you look at the total expenditure and expenditure adjustments line item, that the fund going negative is based off of the board fully expending its authorized budget. If we fully expended our authorized budget, we would be spending more than $1 million more than we're spending now. So if you look at the current year that we're in, we're projected to spend a little bit more than 3 million. We still have a structural deficit. We're only bringing in 2.6, but we're not fully expending our budget. So if we continue to be conservative as we have been, we should not go negative in budget year +2, which would be 26-27. That should only occur if we fully expended our budget. I just wanted to point that out.
Just a note, I did have my hand up. I didn't want to jump in, but Gregory just answered my question, so I'm good.
And member Club, just as you're chiming in here, I know you had pointed out on our last meeting, we have a fee increase that's taking effect on July 1, and you had asked if that fee increase could be included in the future updates. You will see it here reflected as 2.622, 2.622, and ongoing. you look at the current year we're in, that renewal revenue is projected at 2.1. The bulk of the board's revenue comes from renewal fees, and so the fee increase, additional revenue will most principally be found in this line item. You will also find a more modest increase to our projected revenue in the $477,000 number. That's the other regulatory licenses and permits. These are our initial license fees. Our fee increase that takes effect on July 1 also modestly raises those up. So these are the two areas of our fund condition where you see the projected fee increases showing up that will take effect on July 1.
Thank you for adding that.
Yeah.
I actually did have one quick question. In something prior I read, there were vacancies. Now, do those salaries, are they a part of this budget, and will that adjust the budget if those positions are filled?
That's a great question, Member Dawson, and you're absolutely right. So the 4.3 and 4.4 numbers that you see outgoing assume that we have fully staffed up and are therefore fully expending our budget. The overwhelming bulk of our expenditures are personnel costs. We have 19.9 authorized positions on our budget. We're currently filled at about 13, including myself. So we have been running a vacancy rate, which has been helping our fund condition. So if you look at the current year, you see us projected to spend a little bit more than $3 million. That is directly a result of us having vacancies. If we did not have those vacancies, we'd be probably closer to that $4 million number.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments from board members? Board members online? Are there any comments from those on the phone, Mr. Moderator?
We are open for public comment via WebEx. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial-in users dial *3 to raise a hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue with the agenda?
Yes, please. Thank you. Oh, and also, is there any public comment from the room? I see no hands raised. So thank you very much, ladies.
Thank you.
All right, let's go ahead and move on to item number 5, which is discussion and possible action on the board president's report. But before we get into the action item, I first would like to welcome Martin Dawson, the board's newest member, to his first official meeting. Member Dawson was appointed by Governor Newsom in March. He is from San Diego, is a registered CLD and SLD, and is also a co-pastor of the Pillar of Fire Church in San Diego. On behalf of the board, welcome. Would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, just a few. Thank you. Of course, I'd like to thank Governor Newsom for the appointment, Mr. Pruden, Ms. Batista for helping me with all the onboarding. Thank you for calling. Thank you for the welcome. And it's just a pleasure to be here. I take this very seriously. I don't take this lightly. Consumer protection is one of the most important things, if not the most important things that we're able to ensure. Thank you to everyone for the warm welcome. I'd like to thank my wife, Linda, and my daughter, Amara, who rearranged schedules to get me here on time. And thank Prison Fellowship for affording me the opportunity to be here to participate. So thank you.
All right, thank you and welcome. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and move on to item number 5B, which is our board officer elections. As you see from the meeting materials, the law requires the board to elect a president, vice president, and secretary who are required to hold office for 1 year or until election of a successor. Officers can serve more than one term and are not limited to a cap. Our board administrative manual, which is also in the materials, requires the board president to solicit nominees at least 45 days before the election of new officers. which was done at our prior meeting in February. And the nomination period closed on March 31st. There was one nominee for each position. And the nominees are Vice President Garcia was nominated for President, Secretary Linden was nominated for Vice President, and Member Bragg was nominated for Secretary. Are there any questions or discussions from our members? I see no hands raised here. I don't have to get a comment from anybody else.
No, I was going to maybe look to council here if we have to take these individually, or if there could be a motion to elect as a slate, if you will. I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
I would just take them individually.
So we can proceed under that mechanism, and then it's clearly not a contested election. But if candidates would like to make a statement, they certainly are, able to do so, and now would probably be the time.
Before I have you guys make statements, are there any comments from our members online? I see no hands raised there, so if you guys would each would any of you like to make a statement?
As Member Garcia, I would like to make a statement. So I appreciate again everyone's support. President Wong, you've been a great mentor. I look forward to reaching out to you in times of need. Mr. Pruden, you've been awesome to work for. We are very fortunate to have you on board. I mean, that is absolute. And I look forward to serving with you as the president of the board. But I look forward to working with all of you. I see a lot of very smart, intelligent, and you all bring something different to the table. So I think we have an excellent board right now, and I look forward to the next year. I look forward to working with all of our partners out in the community and in the state. And consumer protection is very important, and I think we all take that very seriously. But I do look forward to working with all of you, and again, appreciate the nomination.
Ms. Linden or Dr. Bragg, do you want to make a comment or statement?
Yeah, thank you for the nomination. This will be my third year on the board. And so, each year it's been great to learn more, to work with all of the board members. I second Jeff's comment. Greg, great to work with you as well. So I look forward to continuing to serve in this new capacity. And thank you everyone for your support.
Okay, I guess I'll go. I'm honored to have been nominated, so thank you very much. And I look forward to serving my esteemed colleagues in every capacity possible. I'm very dedicated to this board, consumer protection, and also maintaining highest quality of optometric care for our licensees as well. So it's kind of a dual purpose board. So I appreciate it, and thank you guys.
All right, wonderful. Thank you. So I just need a motion for each.
Yes, I think we need to take a motion and a second for each, and then conduct the vote, public comment, conduct the vote.
So do I want to do 3 motions? Can I do them all 3 in a row? Or do I have to do motion, public comment?
I would do motion, second, public comment, and then repeat.
Okay.
Oh, vote, then repeat.
Okay. All right. So let's go ahead, and we're going to start with our nomination for secretary. Can I have a motion to nominate Dr. Bragg as secretary?
Just a clarification, a motion to elect.
To elect Dr. Bragg as our secretary.
I'll make that motion.
Mr. Kleppa has made the motion. Could I get a second?
I'll second.
And Mr. Clemens is seconding. Are there any public comments from those in the audience here? I see no hands raised in the room. Are there any comments from those on the phone?
We are open for public comment for secretary. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial-in users dial *3 to raise a hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take just a few seconds to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue with the motion?
Yes, please. Secretary Linden, if you could please perform a roll call vote.
Public comment in the room.
Oh, I did public comment in the room first.
My bad.
Remembered. All right. Ms. Linden, if you could perform a roll call vote.
The motion is to elect Dr. Bragg as board secretary, made by Member Kleppa, seconded by Dr. Garcia. Dr. Bragg,
Aye.
Member Clemens,
Aye.
Member Dawson,
Aye.
Member Kleppa,
Aye.
Member Linden, aye. Dr. Pruitt,
Aye.
Member Sims,
Aye.
Member Sue,
Aye.
Dr. Garcia,
Aye.
and Dr. Wong.
Aye.
Okay, and the motion passes.
Perfect. The motion passes. Let's go ahead and I'm going to make another motion. I'd like to make a motion to elect Ms. Linden as vice president.
Second that motion, Member Sims.
Who made it? Oh, I made the motion. Okay, and I have a second from
Sims.
Sims. Okay, so can I please have, is there any public comment for those in the audience here in the room? No hands are raised in the room. Are there any comments from those on the phone?
If you'd like to make a comment via WebEx, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial-in users dial *3. And as a reminder to our mobile device users, you may need to hit the ellipses button. That's the ... We're going to take just a few seconds to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue with the motion?
Yes, please. Thank you. Ms. Linden, if you could perform a roll call vote, please.
Dr. Bragg,
Aye.
Member Clemens,
Aye.
Member Dawson,
Aye.
Member Kleppa,
Aye.
Member Linden, aye. Dr. Pruitt,
Aye.
Member Sims,
Aye.
Member Sue,
Aye.
Dr. Garcia,
Aye.
and Dr. Wong.
Aye.
Okay, so the motion passes.
Okay, so our motion passes. And I'd like to, may I have a motion to elect Jeff Garcia as president?
I move to elect Dr. Garcia as president.
And can I get a second?
I second. Member Pruitt.
Pruitt, seconds, perfect. Are there any public comments from those here in the audience? There are no hands raised in the room. Are there any comments from those on the phone?
We are open for public comment on the new motion. If you'd like to make a comment, raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial-in users dial *3 to raise a hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue with the motion?
Yes, please. Thank you. Ms. Linden, if you could please perform a roll call vote.
Bragg,
Aye.
Clemens,
Aye.
oh, sorry. I'll start over. Okay, motion to elect Dr. Garcia as president was made by Dr. Bragg, seconded by Dr. Pruitt. Dr. Bragg,
Aye.
Member Clemens,
Aye.
Member Dawson,
Aye.
Member Kleppa,
Aye.
Member Linden, aye. Dr. Pruitt,
Aye.
Member Sims,
Aye.
Member Sue,
Aye.
Dr. Garcia,
Aye.
and Dr. Wong.
Aye. All right, so motion passes. Thank you, everybody. Let's go ahead and move on to, and congratulations. Let's go ahead and move on to item 5C, which is discussion of board and committee composition. With the election of Dr. Garcia to the president position effective July 1st, the board should discuss its composition, especially its membership on committees. Traditionally, the vice president would serve on several committees in their role in keeping the president informed and updated. Additionally, with two recent appointees to the board, the newly elected board president may decide to make committee membership changes. Following this meeting and upon the term of president beginning July 1st, new committee assignments will be announced. Are there any comments from board members?
Yeah, I think what we're wanting to try to accomplish here is a conversation to try to garner interest, see what, especially the new members may have an interest in serving on. These are our present committees. They don't have to necessarily stay the same in terms of names, but certainly also in terms of membership and who is on them, or even the numbers of folks that may serve. Just one quick distinction, work groups are two-member work groups where two members serve on them. Work groups are not subject to Bagley-Keene. They do not make, they do not take action on behalf of the board. They make recommendations. So if we were looking to expand numerically, just be aware of that distinction between a work group and a committee and how Bagley-Keene comes into play.
Any comments or from our board members? Oh,
I have a
Mr.
question. We have various work groups and committees, but no set agenda for any of them as far as I'm aware. How will we be setting agendas for each of those committees and what will they involve?
So the frequency of meetings for committees is determined by both the chair and myself as the executive officer. Committees don't generally need to meet as frequent as board meetings. Same with work groups, very much more on a as needed basis. Couple exceptions that this board has would be the Practice and Education Committee, which is the committee that reviews and approves continuing education courses that are applied for via the board. That is a committee that does meet, I would say, quarterly. The other committees may only meet once or twice a year or may not meet at all. Some of these committees and work groups did not have meetings for quite a while. We have recently tried to restart some of them, like the Consumer Protection, Public Relations and Outreach Committee, as well as the Reg Committee, which has met a few times. So I hope that answers your question, Member Kleppa.
It certainly does on how often they'll meet. Do we have an idea of what kinds of items we'll be meeting on, or is that subject to future discussion between our new chair and you?
In terms of agenda setting, yeah, the chair and myself would have the principal roles in determining that. Certainly when the committees and the work groups meet, we would generally have an item on the agenda for future items, and the other participants on the committees and work groups can bring up items for the future in that way. But yeah, again, these committees are, if there's topics to discuss, I would certainly like to know about them. I think the chairs would as well. And so, yeah, if you have ideas for topics for certain committees, we'd love to hear them.
Thank you.
And Mr. Clemens had a comment as well.
Good morning. As one of the two new kids, along with Mr. Dawson, I don't see my name anywhere on here. And since you are soliciting interest, as one of the public members without the specific technical training that the rest of you have, I would not want to crowd into an area where technical capacity is most important. So given the discretion of the outgoing and the incoming president, I would respectfully submit that I might be best qualified for either or both of consumer protection, public relations, and outreach, based on my professional training, and legislation regulation, also based on, we're stating the obvious here. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any, Mr. Dawson?
Yeah, and I'll follow his lead and be obvious also. If we are looking to increase the numbers of the work group members, Children's Vision Work Group and Optometry and Optician Practice Act work groups, I hope I could add a voice to both of those.
Fantastic. Thank you. Anyone else want to make a comment?
This is Member Garcia. So yeah, I would like to invite everyone on the board to look at the different committees and reach out to me over the next month in the committees that you feel would best suit your interests. But also be flexible because there may be committee vacancies and work group vacancies that we'll need to fill. So I may be reaching out to you as well to help with that. But again, thank you for your flexibility and willingness to volunteer.
I did have a comment, I guess, about the telehealth work group being a new member. We haven't met, but I was wondering if maybe we could expand it into including technology, AI, or maybe even a separate work group because these fields are growing rapidly. So I don't know if that would want to be combined into one or a separate work group.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Maybe keep it as, it would be up to Dr. Garcia,
Right.
but maybe we do telehealth, teletechnology, to kind of keep it a little bit more on the broad side work group. But I think that's an excellent.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's an excellent suggestion. We'll keep it open to maybe advanced technologies or something that we can discuss the title, but to include all of those things would be a really good idea with AI affecting all industries. Yeah.
And then I think we have, are there any?
Real quick, it's certainly to say that, as Vice President Garcia just stated, also let him know if there's any committees that you're on that you don't want to be on. That might be helpful for him as well.
Oh, and I have a comment or I guess a question. Like, for example, if it's a work group, it's 2 members, they don't have to follow the public meeting requirements. But for example, like if it's a children's vision issue and just say the Consumer Protection Committee is, maybe taking a look at a part of that, it would be fine to invite other members to attend that committee meeting, right? Or not?
So this would probably be a very fact-specific question. From a hypothetical stance, Bagley Keene is triggered by 3 members discussing a matter within the board's jurisdiction. And I cannot specifically think of an exemption for a board member commenting to a 2-member committee or work group. So if it's 3 members discussing, I would move it to being needed to be Bagley Keene.
Or I guess if we have a committee that's already following Bagley Keene, can additional members not on that committee attend that
Oh,
committee?
I'm comfortable with that.
Okay.
We can,
We actually did that
right?
in April. Yeah, we had, I can't remember which committee it was. It might have been Consumer Protection. I think Member Dawson had been recently appointed and you viewed the meeting. You didn't participate, but you were logged on viewing it just to get your feet wet.
Yeah, it was the regs committee.
The Reg one. Thank you.
Are there any other comments from members? I believe we have Ruby Garcia from the public.
Yeah, I'm so sorry for coming in.
Turn your mic on.
Can you hear me now? I just didn't want to move on to the next agenda. We wanted to acknowledge and thank Member Dawson for accepting his appointment. California State Society for Opticians, very, very excited. I was just like overjoyed to see your name and quickly applaud you for that. And we're here to support you. And also I congratulate all the new nominees and we're here to support you as well. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Garcia.
So we're just going to move on to item number 6. Dr. Barnett here. All right, we are moving on to item number 6, which is a presentation from Dr. Melissa Barnett, who is the Director of Optometry at the University of California at Davis. Is Dr. Barnett in the room?
Well, real quick, before we move there, I'm not sure if we fully accomplished public comment on the last item online.
Yeah, I don't think we did online. We should probably
Sorry.
just specifically
Double
ask for
check.
it in the room.
That was an action item on the last one, so.
So before we move on to item number 6, we have no more additional public comment in the room. If we could check to see if there is any public comment online or on the phone.
We are open for public comment via WebEx. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial in users, dial *3 to raise a hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. And this is back to agenda item 5. Seeing no request for public comment, I think we're safe to proceed to 6.
Great, thank you very much. I don't see Dr. Barnett in the room, so I think
Yeah, we have item 6 next on our agenda, but I'm not seeing our presenter here in the room who's supposed to be here at this time. So I think we could, if council is okay, we can skip this item for now. We can move on to item 7 and we can always revisit if we have time left in the agenda.
That works.
okay, let's go ahead and go on with item number 7, which is discussion and possible action to initiate a rulemaking to adopt Title 16 California Code of Regulations, Article 11.5, Section 15.72, related to radio frequency technology and devices. And this is going to be by Mr. Pruden and our right counsel.
Thank you, President Wong and members. As President Wong just stated, this is agenda item number 7 to discuss and possibly act on a rulemaking to adopt a regulation related to radio frequency technology and devices. In your packet for item 7, you have a memo as well as proposed regulatory text. Just a quick background on this issue and why we're talking about it today. Just a little bit more than a month ago, about a month and a half ago, our Consumer Protection, Public Relations, and Outreach Committee met and received a presentation regarding the use of radio frequency technology. This is a technology that optometrists use to treat dry eye disease. Following that meeting, the committee directed staff to bring to the board a full regulation package, which you have in front of you today. We have presented here today a regulation package which would affirmatively authorize the use of radio frequency technology for the use of dry eye by California licensed optometrists. I want to just talk quickly about what this technology is, how we use it, and the authority that we have that we're pursuing here. There are several methods to treat dry eye that optometrists use, and most of these methods have affirmative authorization in the law. One of these technologies that is used is called intense pulse light therapy, or IPL. It is a technology that is used to essentially liquefy and release oils that have hardened and clogged the glands in your eyelids. And this technology, IPL, was FDA approved about 3 years ago. And then the scope of practice for California was updated as well, effective January 1st, 2022. It, at that time, authorized affirmatively IPL for use in California by California licensed optometrists. As I've mentioned, radio frequency is also a technology that is used, although it does not have affirmative legal authority in California at this time. Radio frequency is a technology that is used to deliver electrical currents to the surface of the skin to stimulate collagen growth. One of the things that the Consumer Protection Committee directed staff to look at in pursuing this issue and this topic was to try to figure out what studies were out there and what did the studies say about RF, radio frequency, and its utility for treating dry eye. And in your packet, we've included citations and links to 3 of these studies, all 3 of which showed promise for the technology in treating dry eye, and in neither of the studies was patient harm found. One of the studies was conducted by ophthalmologists who found that the use of radio frequency technology, especially when combined with other technologies like IPL or massage, a gland expression technique, really shows promise in improving patient outcomes. And then lastly, I want to talk about what authority that the board has here to pursue this regulation. Specifically, the authority that the board has is found at Business and Professions Code Section 3041 A5G2, which says that optometrists can use non-invasive devices or technology if they have been approved by the board through regulation for the rational treatment of a condition or disease authorized by this chapter. Any regulation under this paragraph shall require a licensee to successfully complete an appropriate amount of clinical training to qualify to use each non-invasive medical device or technology approved by the board pursuant to this paragraph. RF technology meets all of these requirements. It's non-invasive. It has been FDA approved for use over the counter and in other settings for more than 2 decades, but it has not received an FDA approval for a specific use in treating the visual system. And additionally, studies show promise in treating patients suffering from dry eye syndrome, especially when combined with the other treatments that I previously mentioned. In summary, authorizing this proposal is an important tool for the optometrists to treat their patients suffering from dry eye disease, and we hope that the board will support and approve the regulatory package today. Happy to take questions and comments from any of the members.
I have a question for the executive director. Thank you, by the way, for doing the studies that we asked for at that committee meeting. I do note a reference to 17 states which apparently have authorized the use of this technique by their optometrists. So it's your understanding or staff's understanding that all of these states have expressly approved the use of this technique in those states on patients. Is that correct?
I would be careful in using the word expressly approved. That would be my only hangup there, but feel absolutely confident in our staff research regarding the number 17. In fact, it may even be higher as we talk here today. The scope of practice for optometrists in other states, as you probably can imagine, is they're not all the same, right? And they're not all written the same. But there are many states that have a more advanced scope of practice than California, whether it's specifically authorizing RF, whether it's authorizing the use of lasers. Some of these laser devices also have an RF component to it. So I would just be careful about expressly authorizing. Part of the staff research that we did was a combination of reviewing what's publicly available in terms of practice acts and other articles and materials like that. Staff also reached out to the Association of Regulatory Boards of Optometry, who sampled the member boards of optometry on this topic. So again, just want to be careful about saying expressly, because you may have some states where you cannot find a statutory express authority for this, but their regulations or policy as determined by that board has authorized it.
Okay, so let me ask it a different way. Are we aware of any of those states or any state that is moving to limit the use of this procedure for any reason?
I'm not aware of any states that have expressly prohibited or banned it.
Fair enough. Thank you.
I have a couple short, quick questions. Number one, do our schools in California use this as part of the training? You said it can or it may include. Do we know that any of the optometric schools are actually using this as part of the curriculum?
I'll answer it in part and then also defer to our board president, who is an educator. I know that at least one is. I don't know if all three are.
I don't know if all three are either, but if this is approved, then the schools will obviously include that in the training as well.
Absolutely. And again, thank you. As the other member said, thank you for doing the research. The obvious question, were there any adverse or side effects of this treatment reported in any of the other states that was part of the research that you found?
None reported to staff, no.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments from any other board members?
Yes,
The
Member
room.
Garcia, I just want to also say if any of you have any specific questions that are non-optometrists on the board or in the public, we have 3 optometrists sitting here, 4, one more out on video, that we'd be more than happy to answer any questions regarding RF or dry eye treatments. So I'll kind of continue. So I do treat dry eye, Member Garcia here. We've been treating dry eye in our practice for probably 10 to 12 years. It's a very growing segment of the optometric and ophthalmological fields. Approximately 30 to 40 million Americans have dry eye, and I'm sure it's much higher than that, because as we are treating dry eye in our clinics, we're discovering that more people have dry eye than we even realized. There are 2 basic types of dry eye. There's aqueous insufficiency and MGD, or meibomian gland dysfunction. Those are the 2 causes. Aqueous insufficiency, as it sounds, it means you don't produce enough tears. There are medications that have been out there to treat that for many years, like Xiidra, Restasis, those types of drops. But that's only a very small segment of the dry eye population. Roughly 80% are the other type, which is MGD. So MGD is a condition where the oil glands of the eyelids, the oil is either too thick to come out, or the glands are actually capped, so the oil can't make it out into the tear film. In short, a healthy tear film requires 2 layers. You have to have the aqueous layer, which is the tear, and the meibum layer, which is the oil, and the oil layer sits to the surface up against the air. So if you don't have that oil layer, that liquid layer, the aqueous, will just evaporate very quickly, more so especially with any type of airflow, ceiling fans, air conditioning in the car, things like that. So it's very common. Blink rate as well. If you're on a computer, you're blinking less, the tears will evaporate faster. So establishing a healthy tear by getting those oils into the tear film is really, really critical. And again, it's a really large segment of the population, and optometrists throughout California and throughout the country are really engaging with dry eye. Again, I've been doing it for quite a while. We have been using low level light and IPL and thermal treatments in our practice. And we also have learned that doing multiple therapies is more effective rather than a single therapy. And radiofrequency is just another tool or a toolbox that an optometrist can use in California to help their patients. So again, standalone, it may not be 100% effective, but once you start combining technologies, then patient success for dry treatment really increases significantly. So I'm looking forward to it. And again, dry eye is a very safe, in general, treatment technology. And all of these treatments have been in dermatology and in healthcare for many, many decades. It's just new to optometry. So the efficacy and the safety is well established. Thank you.
Are there any other comments from our board members in the room? Any comments from our board members online?
Yes, Board Member Sims, I just want to thank the staff for doing that research. That was one of the things we requested when we met during the committee. So I just wanted to thank the staff for doing that.
Thank you, Ms. Sims. And then I have Christine Schultz from COA here in the room, and I believe she's going to make a comment.
Good morning, board members. Christine Schultz, representing the California Optometric Association. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today. I just wanted to express our support for your proposed regulation for the reasons that Dr. Garcia explained. You did a great job of explaining that. That's probably the best I've ever heard. So I won't try to elaborate any further. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And then could we check to see if there's any comments from those on the phone?
We are open for public comment via WebEx. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial-in users dial *3 to raise a hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. As a reminder, you're going to get 3 minutes to speak, and I'll give you a 30-second warning before that time expires. Hold on just a moment. Randall May, we're going to call on you in just a second. You're going to receive a request to unmute your microphone.
Just real briefly, it's my understanding that medical devices are regulated by the federal government, by U.S. Food and Drug, it's a prohibited act for a clinician to use a device that hasn't been cleared or approved by U.S. FDA. So my question is, if clinicians are using devices consistent with the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act that have been determined safe and effective, why is this needed? It seems like that would be fine to do. Or conversely, if the device hasn't been approved and demonstrated to be safe and effective, then wouldn't it conflict with federal law to approve the use of an adulterated or misbranded device? Anyway, that's my comment for the board. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Are there any other comments for those on the phone?
That was our only request for comment.
Perfect.
Discussion.
Are there any other discussion or comments from our board members?
Member Kleppa here, given the comment we just received from that individual, maybe our legal counsel can confirm that we still retain authority to undertake this action, even if the particular device is not expressly FDA approved. I see it in the authority memo. I just thought counsel could amplify that a little bit.
Yes, so the board has authority underneath its Practice Act to independently approve devices.
I would just chime in too that radio frequency technology does have FDA approval and clearance. The unique issue is that it does not have FDA clearance and approval specific to the visual system. And under our Practice Act, the scope of optometry requires items to be specific to the visual system and within a condition that the optometrist is legally authorized to treat. So the technology and the devices do have FDA clearance and approval. They've been on the market for at least 24 years. They just do not have a specific approval for the visual system or for dry eye. But as council stated, we have authority under our Practice Act to pursue this regulation.
Thank you for the clarification.
Okay, so with that, with all of our discussion, thank you, everyone.
I just want to make one comment. This is Member Linden. If I remember from the meeting as well, if the board, waiting for potential FDA approval could be a process that could take a decade, right? And so that's part of the reason why, you kind of think, oh, of course, the FDA would approve it first, but realistically, it could take a very, very long time. And so that's kind of my understanding. If this technology is out there, if it's been authorized for use in other states for this purpose without a history of adverse effects, that could be a reason why, we would do it under our own authority versus waiting for the federal government to act first.
Member Linden, what you described is exactly what happened with IPL.
All right, well, thank you, everybody. So I would like to propose approving the proposed regulatory text. Oh, I want to make a motion.
We need a motion.
Yeah.
And in the packet, so we need a motion in a second. In our packet, we have a proposed motion.
All right, so I'm going to read proposed motion number 1, and then hopefully someone will make this motion. So the motion is to approve the proposed regulatory text and adoption of Section 1572 as provided in the materials and direct staff to submit all approved texts to the Director of the Department of Consumer Affairs and the Business, Consumer Services, and Housing Agency for review. If the board does not receive any comments providing objections or adverse recommendations specifically directed at the proposed action or to the procedures followed by the board in proposing or adopting the action, then the board authorizes the executive officer to take all necessary steps to initiate the rulemaking process, make any technical or non-substantive changes to the package, and set the matter for hearing. If no adverse comments are received during the 45-day comment period or at the hearing, authorize the executive officer to take all steps necessary to complete the rulemaking and adopt the proposed regulations at Section 1572 as noticed. Can I get a motion? Or a second? I'm making the motion.
I'll second that.
Oh, was that Mr. Dawson seconded? Thank you. Public comment from the room? Is there any public comment from the room? There are no hands raised in the room. Are there any is there any public comment on the phone?
We have a motion and a second on the floor. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial-in users dial *3 to raise a hand. And as a reminder to our mobile device users, if you're having trouble finding that hand button, you may need to hit the ellipses button. That's a ... at the bottom and cycle through one of 3 pages. We're going to take just a couple more seconds to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue with the motion?
Yes, thank you very much. Ms. Linden, if we could have a roll call vote, please.
Okay, Dr. Bragg,
Aye.
Member Clemens,
Aye.
Member Dawson,
Aye.
Member Kleppa,
Aye.
Member Linden, aye. Dr. Pruitt,
Aye.
Member Sims,
Aye.
Member Sue,
Aye.
Dr. Garcia,
Aye.
and Dr. Wong.
Aye. Right.
Okay.
So motion passes. Thank you. All right. At this point, now we're going to move back to item number 6, where we will be receiving a presentation from Dr. Melissa Barnett, who is Director of, I can't talk, day more today, who is Director of Optometry at the University of California at Davis. She is going to be giving us a talk titled regarding ocular surface disease, exploring the impact of hormonal influence. Welcome, Dr. Barnett. If you want to come up to the front.
What would be, because there's no TV in front of you, huh? So you just have.
Oh, that's
Oh, okay. We can drop a monitor.
Yeah.
So that
So I think it comes over.
so that you can.
Yeah.
It'll be a monitor that comes right up there, and we can drop down. That way you have something in front of you to visually look at.
Do this, and then is
Okay.
there some sort of advancer or?
We've, Erica back there is controlling your slides for you. Yep.
Okay. I'll say next slide. Cool. Hi, everyone.
Hello, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. No, yeah, you're so accommodating, but I'm great. As long as everyone in the room can see, we're great. Thank you. Perfect. Well, thank you all for having me today. It's a pleasure to be here, and this came off of a discussion that we were having about sort of my patient population and dry eye. So really enjoyed the last presentation on dry eye. Thank you for the comments on how prevalent dry eye is, and it is incredibly prevalent. So next slide. So dry eye is one of the most common eye diseases in the US, so 38 million adults, but I agree that it's much, much more than that. We do have to rule out dry eye in every single patient because it is an incredibly prevalent condition. So 1 out of 7 American adults, but if you look globally and worldwide, you look at cities in Asia, for example, it's 80–90% of people who have dry eye. And if we look at the Tear Film and Ocular Surface Society report that came out last year in 2023, and it dove into all the different things that really are lifestyle and how it influences dry eye, such as digital device use. We all are on digital devices so much during the day, which is why we have to look at all these different factors when it comes to dry eye. So the medications that are taking, the topical medications, even now, like I know we've talked a lot about artificial tears and all the recalls, and it's a crazy time with that right now in the world. But still, I have patients who are coming in using products that are not safe and healthy for the ocular surface. We look at things like smoking and vaping also, and how that influences the ocular surface, and sex and hormones. So today we're going to talk about hormones and sex, and this started with a conversation about all of the transgender patients that I'm seeing and how hormonal changes really influence the ocular surface. And there aren't a lot of publications right now. There will be a lot of publications, I think, coming in the next few years. But this is just something that I'm seeing in practice, being the director of optometry at UC Davis, that a lot of my patients are experiencing all of these significant dry eyes. So today I'm going to talk about sort of some publications, some studies that are out there looking at hormones and dry eye. I hope that all of you are familiar with the TFOS-JUS2 definition of dry eye that came out in 2017, that dry eye is the loss of homeostasis of the tear film. Oh, sorry, next slide times 2 and 3. There we go. And then we have ocular surface inflammation and damage, and we have the tear film, the beautiful tear film, which provides that tear film homeostasis, or that natural balance, which is so important for all of us, especially those who wear, say, makeup, cosmetics, and that's everyone, not just women wear makeup anymore. It's everyone who wears makeup that can really damage the ocular surface. Those of us who wear contact lenses, a contact lens separates the tear film into the pre and post lens tear film. And of course, just our day-to-day lives of being awake so long, being on many different digital devices during the day. Okay, we're gonna do next slide. I'm gonna get this. Evaporation spins this vicious cycle of inflammation. So we have things like eye surgery, cataract surgery, could be one. Any sort of refractive surgery is associated with ocular dryness, many different systemic diseases, especially autoimmune diseases. So if I have a patient who comes in and they have dry eye, I always want to ask about dry mouth and any sort of arthritis that they might have as well, and evaluate for autoimmune disease. We have just our environment in general, which really influences the ocular surface. Simple things like sunglasses outdoors, goggles while swimming, all of these things affect the ocular surface and our different behaviors and traits. Okay, we're going to do next slide here. There we go. I'm going to get this. The prevalence is much more common of dry eye in women, and that's what the studies are showing now because we don't have studies quite yet. And again, we will have future studies, but aging is definitely a risk factor. We know that many patients with age, and I never like to tell my patients that they're getting old or anything like that. I never say you're getting old. I say with time. That these things can happen, such as presbyopia, right, and dry eye. Sex hormones are key factors, and all these changing hormone levels and decreased androgens also contribute to the ocular surface. Okay, next slide here. So dry eye is much more common in women than men, and there are many different sex-related differences in dry eye that are attributed to many different things. So sex steroids like androgens, estrogens, insulin, and all the hormonal changes in those who are transitioning also affect the ocular surface too. So next slide. Gender is a risk factor for dry eye, and gender and sex have different meanings. So gender is a person's self-representation as a man or woman. Sex distinguishes males and females based on their biological characteristics. And both gender and sex affect the risk of dry eye, presentation of the ocular surface, immune responses, pain, and also care-seeking behaviors. I love this gender-bred person to really explain it. I hope that all of you have seen this before, talking about sex and gender and orientation. And many of our patients are identifying in all sorts of different ways now. And we do have to appreciate that, which led to another discussion about prescriptions, about glasses and contact lens prescriptions that I brought to the board because we really don't need sex on there. It really doesn't matter for a glasses or contact lens prescription how a person identifies. And then we also had a discussion about the name. So thank you for all these conversations that I've had over time, calling you with all these things that we're seeing in our clinic and seeing with our patients who are have a chosen name or a given name and all of that. But getting back to sex and gender and hormones, so there's a difference in dry eye between men and women, and hormones definitely change during time. So, and I have one of my favorite studies that just came out about ocular changes during a person's lifetime, during a woman's lifetime. So there are many different studies looking at hormone replacement therapy. We can also talk about all sorts of other things, such as birth control pills that change hormones that influence the ocular surface as well. In one of the studies, menopause was a risk factor for dry eye and hormone replacement therapy was beneficial. Other studies show that estrogen therapy in women triggered or worsened the onset of dry eye and or Sjogren's. And there could be a theory for the conflicting results. If you look at many different studies, they do conflict. And it can be that the hormone replacement therapy depends on the dosage of the estrogen, the age. Oh, let's move on. Sorry. Next slide. There we go. Thank you. The age when individuals when therapy was first initiated, estrogen might help younger women and might be detrimental in postmenopausal women. And it can also be the type and combination of the hormone replacement therapy. So higher doses in combination with other hormonal supplements can be harmful and or induce inflammation. And those who are older or elderly, it might be more susceptible. So next slide, please. Androgens impact the structure and function of the meibomian glands and lacrimal glands. And I do have all the references, as you can see here at the bottom, if you want to look into these studies. And this is important to regulate the ocular surface as well. And if we move on to the next slide, sex hormones can influence the immune system. And it could be that estrogen may modulate a cascade of inflammatory events which underlie dry eye. Next slide. Hormones include all these different hormones which do affect the ocular surface, and there are many publications about each one. Something that we see very commonly are autoimmune conditions, thyroid disease, Sjogren's syndrome, lupus. If you look at other things such as diabetes, that also influences the ocular surface as well. And we see that commonly as well. So if we move on to the next slide, there we go. Androgen deficiency is associated with corneal and conjunctival damage. So we do evaluate the ocular surface, looking for staining on the conjunctiva, also the cornea. This has a significant reduction in the tear breakup time, an increase in corneal fluorescein and rose bengal staining. I always say if you don't like your patient, use rose bengal. It really stings. It's really irritating, but we love our patients. We don't dislike them at all. Okay, and then we move on to the next slide. This is my favorite new study. I have lots of favorite studies. One of my favorite new studies, and this is the effects of female sex hormones on the human cornea across a woman's life cycle. So this talks about the different structural and functional changes of the human cornea in different aspects of a woman's life, such as pregnancy and menopause and all the different hormonal changes. This is a review of many different studies that were identified by a PubMed search. So it looked at the changes in central corneal thickness over a person's lifetime, changes in intraocular pressure, and changes in the tear film quality. And from all the previous publications, I'll say we're the most familiar with the tear film quality part of it, and maybe not as familiar with the CCT and the IOP. So tear film changes, not surprisingly, during pregnancy can impact the function of the ocular surface. Hormonal shifts in menopause follow a pattern opposite to those of pregnancy. Very interesting, fun fact that you can share at dinner tonight is that IOP tends to increase after menopause. So we can go around. Yeah, I know. Look at that. See, you learned something new. And central corneal thickness tends to decrease after menopause. Again, another fun fact that you can share. And there's a higher incidence of dry eye amongst postmenopausal women. We see this commonly in clinical practice. And the cornea does respond to external hormonal treatments, such as hormonal replacement therapy, and in preparation for in vitro fertilization. So kind of a really cool study. And if we move on to the next slide here, great. Don't expect you to memorize this, but if we look at all the different aspects, this is super interesting looking, say, at pregnancy, how intraocular pressure is reduced, and of course, tear breakup time is reduced, which contributes to more dry eye and an increase in central corneal thickness. And then, say, during menopause, of course, the tear breakup time is still reduced, more dry eye, and we have an increase in IOP, but a reduction in central corneal thickness. So kind of cool stuff. And this is really neat, and this might be the future, is that sex hormones could be therapeutic agents. So, for example, to treat refractive error, and this is in an animal model, a topical application of estrogen eye drops resulted in a 0.6 diopter myopic shift that regressed when treatment ceased. So perhaps we'll be using hormones to treat myopia in the future. So just kind of neat, a really interesting study with a lot of information. So when we see our patients in clinical practice, oftentimes we want to know, well, where do we start? Questionnaires are very helpful. There are many validated dry eye questionnaires. We can ask triaging questions. We want to evaluate for the type of dry eye. And as Dr. Garcia mentioned, yes, it's definitely mixed mechanism for the most part, according to LUMP study, 86%. But there is this evaporative component in most patients as well. A questionnaire is helpful. We want to look at osmolarity, staining of the cornea and conjunctiva, evaluating tear breakup time, looking at meibography is really helpful, evaluating the meibomian glands, evaluating the eyelids and lashes in general for meibomian gland dysfunction and blepharitis and Demodex, and they all affect the ocular surface and leading to that lack of tear film homeostasis. This is a different study looking at polycystic ovarian syndrome, which is the most common endocrine abnormality in women of reproductive age. And this is associated with type 2 diabetes. Oh, let's Oh, good job. Good job over there. You're just, you're doing a great job and I'm not. Saying next slide. Obesity. PCOS is also associated with the ocular surface. So this study looked at the signs and symptoms related to ocular allergy and dry eye with young women with PCOS and evaluated for conjunctival hyperemia, which I've gotten very into evaluating conjunctival hyperemia lately in my dry eye patients. So this isn't the sort of hyperemia that we see in someone who comes in with an iritis or an infection or anything like that. It's associated with the meibomian gland dysfunction or the blepharitis or the dry eye, the subtle signs of hyperemia. And there are non-invasive tools, of course, to do this, but we can look and evaluate for conjunctival hyperemia. Back to the study, looking at follicular reaction, abundant mucus secretion, and occasional epithelial punctate keratitis. So this is also another really cool, fun study where it looks at different hormones for different receptor distribution sites and affected functions. So for example, looking at the cornea, we have estrogens, androgens, and progesterone. The receptor distribution sites, epithelial cells, stromal cells, and endothelial cells, and the affected function similar to the last study I shared with you, looking at corneal thickness, corneal curvature, and corneal sensitivity. Corneal sensitivity is something also that we need to be evaluating in our patients, looking for a lack of corneal sensitivity or neurotrophic keratitis. So of course, dry eye is multifactorial. So we want to be looking at the lacrimal glands and meibomian glands and conjunctiva and cornea and evaluating how all of these play together. And this study is kind of neat that goes into the different hormones that are involved in these different functions. Now, I will share the Sjogren's Foundation because we see so many patients who have autoimmune disease and Sjogren's affects so many parts of the body. And Sjogren's is present in so many different people, not just women, but men too. And the Sjogren's Foundation is just a wonderful resource. There is a dry eye brochure that you can share with your patients. And this is something that we see and evaluate their eyes and then diagnose not just Sjogren's, I'd say, but any sort of autoimmune disease. So it could be lupus or undifferentiated connective tissue disease or rheumatoid arthritis, but it's something that is very common in clinical practice. I'm switching gears a tiny bit because this does go into hormones, but it's about keratoconus and changes in pregnancy because that is something, are a lot of studies out there, but a lot of people are not aware. So just wanted to, great job advancing those slides, thank you. So of course, keratoconus is the abnormal posterior ectasia. This is from the global consensus on keratoconus and ectatic diseases, the abnormal distribution of corneal thickness, and the clinically non-inflammatory corneal thinning. Keratoconus is much more prevalent than we think. There's a great study that was just published looking at the prevalence, and the prevalence is about 1 in 352 because now we have advanced screening devices. We have corneal tomography to image the posterior cornea, and we can diagnose keratoconus even better than before. Now, even if we don't have any fancy technology, we can diagnose keratoconus with things like changes in prescriptions, refractive error, contact lenses, retinoscopy, evaluating keratometry and looking for irregular Meyers, and also asking all the things associated with keratoconus, such as allergies, atopy, eye rubbing, etc. But I will bring this up since we're talking about hormones, pregnancy and keratoconus. So there's a change due to the rise in pregnancy-related hormones, so estrogen and relaxin, which alter the biomechanical properties of the cornea and increase its refractive power. So let's see if this video plays. If you push one more time. Oh, it's the neck, back a slide, and let's see if this plays. Well, anyway, you can see here on this visualization of keratoconus versus a normal eye. So basically, a normal eye, when it changes in curvature, it goes back, when it's air is pushed on the cornea, it goes back, but in a keratoconic eye, it's much more stretchy. And if we move on to the next slide, you can see why everything in the body is a little bit more elastic, including the cornea. So this is looking at a study of pregnancy and keratoconus, 22 patients with bilateral keratoconus, 11 intended to become pregnant and 11 did not intend to become pregnant. And this looked at the refractive error and corneal topography prior to pregnancy, during the 3rd trimester, and 6 months after postpartum. So 100% of eyes on the next slide developed in the pregnancy group, had significant development of keratoconus, and none of the eyes in the control group had progression. There was no evidence of reversal after pregnancy. In this individual study, there is no long-term follow-up data. But the importance of this study is that hormonal changes during pregnancy in patients who are diagnosed with keratoconus or keratoconus suspects, or they might progress, and that the corneal changes do not regress. So the important take-home message here is that we do want to stabilize and cross-link the cornea so that these patients don't progress. And I have many personal patients and also friends with keratoconus that have progressed during pregnancy. So here are the last 2 slides. If we move on, maybe back one. This is just looking at, go back a slide, please. Or back 2 slides, back one more slide, and one more slide, back one. There we go, great. This is looking at another just common thing that we see in our patient population. And this is a study looking at anxiety and depression. And this came up because talking to primary care doctors saying, why are we seeing all these changes? Our patients are coming in, having all of these side effects when they're on medications. And I'll share that in just a moment. So this was a study published last year. Out of all adults, 32.3% have anxiety and or depressive disorder. And if you look at the age range of 18 to 24%, it's almost 50% of patients. So this is something that we see in so many of our patients. If you move on to the next slide here, there we go. And this came from that conversation about what about all these antidepressants and what are they doing to a person? There are higher levels of systemic side effects such as dry eye and dry mouth and drowsiness in those using tricyclic antidepressants. So if you go to the next slide, and I don't expect you to memorize this at all, it's a graph with a bunch of different things, but it goes over the different drug class and also the side effects, many of which are dry eye. So dry eye, blurred vision, mydriasis, this has come up a few times in different patients, and we've worked together to adjust the dosage of the medication. So working with primary care is adjusting the dosage so that they're not having these ocular side effects. But this is something that we're seeing very commonly also in our patient population. So I wanted to share this with you. So just with that, just wanted to thank you for your time and happy to answer any questions.
First of all, just thank you. That was, I won't speak for the board, I'll let them speak for themselves, but that was just, I'm going to have to go back to it because that was a lot of really good information. One question I had was just about the comment you made about the sex hormones, and maybe one day in the future we'll be using them to treat patients with dry eye. Are these hormones controlled substances?
I have no idea.
I don't know either, because I know that under the board's, the TPA authority, the therapeutic authority that most all ODs now have in California, the authority allows you to use for rational and off-label use agents that are not controlled substances. So if sex hormones are not controlled substances, which I don't know, it may be possible that.
Maybe Christine knows the answer to this.
Yeah, I guess that's the question, is whether sex hormones are are controlled substances or not. So just something I'm
So
wondering.
something in 20 years when we might see this in humans, yeah, let's, see. I think this is going to take a long time, but that's a great question.
And I don't know the answer exactly, but I do not know of any sex hormones that are controlled substances. I've not seen that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Christine.
Well, thank you, Dr. Barnett. I learned a lot today too. Do any of our board members have any questions or comments for Dr. Barnett?
As Member Garcia, I just have a comment. So the optometrists in the room know who Dr. Barnett is. She's like world-renowned, national speaker. She's an expert in dry eye and anterior segment disease and contact lenses. And I think we've all seen her on different presentations, but it's an honor to have you here today.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
This is Member Linden. I just wanted to make a couple comments. One, I thought it was really interesting you had brought up whether prescriptions even need to mention, gender on them at all. So that's kind of like a note to self, let's maybe look into that a little bit more. And I just want to thank you for your presentation and for all the information you shared. I think especially you hear that so many studies are done looking at kind of, from a male perspective. And so I think it's really refreshing that we have the study that's really looking at how all of these hormonal changes affect everything. And hopefully there are more studies like this being done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments from our members in the room?
I just want to chime in. Just want to chime in on the thank you for such an amazing presentation and just the passion that you presented with. I know your patients are well served. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any comments from our members online? Nope. Well, thank you, Dr. Barnett. That was
Thank you.
very informative.
Thank you.
And also, is there any public comment from those in the room? Or public comment? There's no hands raised in the room. And how about public comment from anyone online? Oh, I take it back. Rubia Garcia is coming to make a comment.
I just wanted to thank you very much for that presentation. We do have optician programs now, and they do get into contact lens fitting. So this would be really good to invite our doctors to come and give presentations to the opticians, because they will also be exposed to understanding, especially all the talk about dry eyes. It'd be great to have you come as guest speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruby. And is there any public comment from those on the phone?
We are open for public comment via WebEx. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial in users dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take just a few seconds to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue with the agenda?
Yes, please. Thank you very much. So once again, thank you, Dr. Barnett, for an excellent, excellent presentation. Before we move on to item number 8, does anyone need a 10-minute biological break? Yeah. Oh, I have a yes. So we're going to take a 10-minute break. The time is 11:33. So we come back at 11:45. Okay, 11:45. We will come back. Thank you. All right. It is now 11:45. Are we recording still? Still recording. Okay. So we are coming back after our break, and we are now going to move on to item agenda number 8, which is discussion and possible action, excuse me, to approve modified text and responses to comments and continue rulemaking to amend Title 16 California Code of Regulations, Section 1505 and 1524, and adopt sections 1583 through 1587 for the Mobile Optometric Office Program. Before we get started on our discussion on the Mobile Optometric Program, if everyone could just humor me for a moment, I would like to make a few comments. I wanted, first of all, to talk about the importance of access to quality eye care by all California consumers, but especially in regards to increasing access of care to the children and other vulnerable populations of California. To give everyone on our board a little bit of history, especially since we have so many new members. Prior to 2020, The ability to provide eye exams through mobile optometric clinics was not allowed by optometrists in California. With the exception of the 3 schools of optometry that are in California, they were allowed to provide mobile offices as part of their teaching programs. With the creation of the Mobile Optometric Office Program, also fondly known as MOO by our staff, in 2020, the landscape for mobile eye care has changed significantly. We have increased the access of care to California consumers, but in order to provide oversight and to ensure the continued quality of care for our most vulnerable populations, we have MOO and our regulatory package. And with that, I would like to turn this over to Gregory Pruden so we can further our discussion.
Thank you, President Wong and members. Yeah, as was just stated, we are talking about agenda item 8, which is the mobile optometric office program, excuse me. As President Wong was just alluding to, prior to 2020, it was not possible for mobile providers to provide this care unless they were affiliated with a school of optometry here in California. This was a regulation that has been on the books for the better part of 50 years. And again, it did not authorize or allow the mobile providers of modern mobile optometric care to provide their care. We had 2 legislative bills that made attempts to rectify this. AB 896 was signed into law in 2020, and it created a new Business and Professions Code section 3072, which for the first time provided a definition of a mobile optometric office. This bill required the board to establish the regulatory program for the mobile optometric office registration by January 1 of 2020. It did make exemptions, 6 categories of exemption from the registration program, and your board meeting materials provide detail on those 6 exemptions. Following the passage of AB 896, which again directed the board to promulgate regulations by January 1, 2022, the very following year, following passage of AB 896, a new bill was introduced and was signed into law, AB 1534. It was signed into law in the fall of 2021, and it made additional changes to the underlying statute, Business and Professions Code Section 3070.2. One of the changes that it made was delaying by 1 year the date by which this board must promulgate the regulations to establish the program. This new date was Jan 1, 2023. In January of 2022, a work group was created consisting of 2 members, a former board member and a current board member. The work group met a few times in that spring and assisted in drafting the regulatory proposal. At the May 22 meeting, so just about 2 years ago, this proposal was approved by the board. A little bit of history as to how we got to where we are today. Following that board approval in the spring of 2022, several of the staff members that had been working on that package departed the board. A new executive officer, myself, and a new policy analyst began that fall, and we commenced work on the regulatory package in the calendar year 2023. Ultimately, the package was sent through the process, was approved by the director and our agency, and was noticed for a 45-day public comment period. The 45-day comment period ended in the beginning of April, and we are here today to consider modified text and the proposed responses to the public comments that we received. I want to give the board and members of the public just a little information about some of the modifications that we're presenting and proposing today. As was just mentioned, I began in this role in the fall of 22 and began commencing work on the regulatory package shortly thereafter. Staff and I, since that time, have participated in dozens of implementation meetings to try to figure out the business process requirements necessary to implement the regulation as directed by statute. Pursuant to these meetings with our partners at DCA and our IT folks, we are proposing a significant downward revision in the proposed fee that we hope you will support today. We also are making some changes to the language that specifies who must be fingerprinted. The existing language that was out for public comment didn't provide the necessary specificity for the regulated community in terms of who needed to be subject to the fingerprint requirement. One of the challenges that we found in the implementation process for this program is our IT system is not as technically advanced as we would all wish it to be. In order to prop up this program, applicants will have to submit a couple different transactions, and the Breeze IT system is not easily able to match that work up. But we have found a workaround solution that will greatly assist us in performing this work, and it's for these reasons that we are able to propose a significant modification in the fee. We have attached in the materials, I believe it's attachment 3, the workload analysis that we have produced to support this new fee. An additional change that I want to talk to the board and members of the public about has to do with the requirement for a patient or guardian to acknowledge receipt of the required consumer notice that the program would specify. We're thankful to our comments that we received during the public process because this language may have had the unintentional consequence of making the expansion of optometric care, which is the entire purpose of the mobile optometric office program, more difficult. Mobile office providers, mobile optometric office providers provide their care under an opt-out mechanism, not an opt-in mechanism. And our original language would have turned that on its head and made it an opt-in. So we've modified this language as well to be consistent with how providers are operating today, and also consistent with the original intent of the entire statute, which was to expand care to vulnerable populations and children. Again, very thankful to the commenters and their participation in this process. Presented today for the board for your discussion and possible approval are modifications to the MOO proposal, which we believe strengthen the board's ability to effectively regulate mobile optometric offices. In your packet is the comments that we received, the proposed responses that we have, as well as the modified text that we would like the board to discuss and consider. With that, I'm happy to take questions from the board members.
Member Kleppa, I do have a question. The reduction in fee seems to have been brought about because of a comment regarding nonprofit agencies will be operating these portable systems. Is it the board's understanding or the executive director's understanding that they will be primarily operated by nonprofits and not for-profit firms?
The mobile office optometric statute only authorizes nonprofits and charities to receive a license. For-profit providers are expressly prohibited.
Makes sense. Thanks.
Question about the language, because it does refer to Breeze a few times specifically.
Yeah.
So if there's ever a modification to the system and it's renamed like Breezier, where you wouldn't have to do those manual changes, would the law then need to be changed, and what costs would be associated with changing the language for any kind of updates to the Breeze system, name-wise?
Yeah, that's a good comment. First of all, I think staff would, everybody would love Breeze to be breezier, including our applicants and licensees. If a future licensing system came online that this board used that had a different name, I'm looking to council here, but I believe we would just need to do a section 100 to change the, reflect the current name of the licensing system. It wouldn't otherwise impact or change our, licensing or application process.
Yes, that's correct. That would just be an easy fix.
I would just say
a free easy fix.
Well,
a breezier fix.
Yeah, breezier fix. I mean, at risk of being totally wrong here, a similar perhaps example or something that comes to my mind as something similar is right now, both in statute and regulation, laws specify the clinical skills exam as the part 3 for NBEO. As we all know, just this month, I believe it was, that name of that exam is now changed, and now it's PEPS. Similarly, we're going to need to make some updates there to reflect the current name, but it doesn't impact our operations or how our applicants engage with us.
Any other comments from board members in the room or online? Do we have any public comment from those in the room? Or public comment from those on the phone?
We are open for public comment via WebEx. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise that hand by tapping the hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial in users, dial *3 to raise a hand. And as a reminder to our mobile device users, you may need to hit the ellipses button. That's the ... in order to find your hand button. We are going to give everyone 3 minutes to speak with a 30-second warning before your time expires. And first up is Damian Carroll. Hold on just a moment. We're sending you a request to unmute your microphone.
My name is Damian Carroll. I'm the National Director of Vision to Learn. We are likely the largest provider of student-based mobile vision care in California. Just wanted to thank all the members of the board for their hard work on putting together these regulations and taking into account input from affected organizations. Vision to Learn is proud to be able to help kids at school who are going without glasses to make connections for those students to local optometry and to continue to improve our program to provide the best level of care possible to students in schools across the state. And again, very thankful for the board's attention to this issue and hard work in putting together this package of regulations, and looking forward to working with the board to register our mobile clinics, mobile optometric offices, I should say, the term of art, and looking forward to helping many more kids in California get the glasses that they need to succeed in school. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Carroll. Are there any other comments by those on the phone?
That was our only request for public comment via WebEx.
Thank you. Okay, well, at this moment, I think I would like to make a motion, and the motion will read as: adopt the proposed responses to comments and the modified text and direct staff to send the modified text out for a 15-day public comment period. If no adverse public comments are received on the modified text, instructed the executive officer to take all steps necessary to complete the rulemaking process. Authorize the executive officer to make any technical or non-substantive changes to the rulemaking package and amend sections 1505 and 1524 and adopt sections 1583, 1584, 1584.5, 1585, 1586, and 1587 as noticed in the modified text. Can I get a second?
Board Member Sims, I second the motion.
Thank you. Ms. Linden, if you could do a roll call vote, please.
Okay, Dr. Bragg,
Aye.
Member Clemens,
Aye.
Member Dawson,
Aye.
Member Klappa,
Aye.
Member Linden, aye. Dr. Pruitt,
Aye.
Member Sims,
Aye.
Member Sue,
Aye.
Dr. Garcia,
Aye.
and Dr. Wong.
Aye.
And the motion passed.
So the motion passes. Thank you. All right, we're going to go to number 9 then. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to item number 9. Thank you, everybody.
Just real quick, I know we were going to pick up lunch around noon. Are we, is it 12:30? It could be 12:30. We can keep going. Okay, we'll keep going, and then if members are okay, we'll keep going. Pick up lunch around 12:30 and then go from there. Okay. Okay, moving on then. Agenda item 9. And we're going to start with 9A, which is the Executive Officer's Report Program Update. Just a staffing update to start. The board's policy analysts began in October 2022, accepted a position with another state agency, and their last day was just before Thanksgiving last year. The board has advertised this position twice to try to establish a pool of candidates, but has not been successful in fielding such a pool of qualified candidates. We have reposted it for a third time earlier this month, and this time we're leaving it open until we are able to establish a sufficient pool. So this is a public service announcement for all those who may be interested in helping this board out with regulations and our newsletter and other exciting things. We would love to see your application for our policy analyst position. There is a copy of the current organizational chart, which is at the end of this item. We were talking earlier in the meeting about some of our vacancies, and this is where you can visualize where some of these vacancies are. There have been a few changes since this document was published in the packet and was dated May 1st. I'd just like to make announcement on one of those items, which is Erica Batista, who's here in the room with us today and taking notes and helping facilitate the WebEx for us. If you look at her spot on the org chart, you'll see an LT, which stands for a limited term. What that means is that the position only lasts for a certain amount of time and then would go away. We want Erica to stay with us, and we don't want her to go anywhere. So the update that we have here is Erica is now in a permanent position, and we are very excited to have her with this board and look forward to years ahead with her in that role. So I just wanted to give that update there. And again, we are recruiting for the policy analyst position, which you see under the admin unit as vacant currently. Going back to my executive officer update, as we've already talked about as well, today new member Martin Dawson was appointed on March 19th by Governor Newsom. We are very happy that he is with us here today in person. A biography of member Dawson has been put on the board's website. There's a link in the electronic materials, so I want to make the board aware of that. Our Sunset Review work group meeting. So I want to talk quickly about Sunset Review and what that is and what this board must do in that process. Every board and bureau in DCA is subject to oversight by the legislature. And usually this oversight is conducted for DCA boards by the Business and Professions committees in the Senate and the Assembly. Every few years, generally every 4, each board and bureau goes through this process called Sunset Review. What Sunset Review really means is that the law authorizing our board or any other board in DCA only exists until a certain time. For us, it is Jan 1, 2026. So if the law is not extended, we all would have to figure out what happened to the board and where it went. Hopefully that we don't have to cross that bridge. So again, every so many years, there's a review that's conducted. And at the end of that review, you hope that your sunset date gets extended out another 4 years. So for us, again, Jan 1, 2026 is our sunset date, and we must go through a series of steps to get us through this process and get that extension. The first step involves a staff preparation of what we call the Sunset Review Report. All of the new members who have been appointed in the last year, one of the many items that you would have gotten from either myself or Erica would have been a copy of our last Sunset Report, which was done in 2020. We went through Sunset Review in 2021. The second step involves board approval of that report. Third step, it must be submitted. The fourth step, there's a legislative hearing where the board president and the executive officer will participate and provide testimony and answers to questions asked by the 2 committees. Following the hearing, there is also a requirement to respond to issues that may have been raised during the process or during that hearing. And then the sixth step really involves collaborating with our partners and the legislature, our stakeholders, on the legislative bill that would extend us out. Again, hopefully another 4 years. We have a sunset review work group that was established earlier this year by Board President Wong. That work group is made up of Vice President Garcia and Secretary Linden, and they are assisting staff and myself in coordinating this sunset review process. Earlier this month, the work group conducted its first meeting to start the planning and preparation process for this report. We are anticipating meeting monthly, and we're hopeful that we'll have a draft report to the board at the August meeting. The board will also have the opportunity to review and approve the report at the December meeting as well, if that's necessary. And ultimately, the report must be submitted to the legislature by the end of this year. We will then go through the hearing process. So after submission of the report, generally in the spring, February, March, April, somewhere around that time period, the legislative committees will conduct the sunset review hearings. As I said earlier, the board president and myself will be there to testify and provide answers to those questions. The committees will also prepare what they call a background paper concerning the board, its operations, and issues. And it is the background paper where the legislature identifies the issues that it wants the board president and the executive officer to respond to during that sunset review hearing. Any items that are not responded to in that hearing are responded to in a written document that's submitted within 30 days after that hearing. So we're looking forward to going through this process and keeping the board updated throughout. Again, as I mentioned, we'll be meeting monthly in preparing this report. Some outreach and committee updates. In April, we had 3 committees meet. We had our Consumer Protection, Public Relations, and Outreach Committee, Practice and Education Committee, and the Legislation and Regulation Committees all met on April 5th. On March 26th, I was able to travel to Western University. I must say a big thank you to Dean Hoppy and her team down there, as well as DCA for helping facilitate the travel down to Western. This was an opportunity for myself to view that school, Western's laser lab. I think, as this board knows, lasers are not an authority that optometrists have under their scope of practice, but in the education setting, because the schools are preparing students for licensure in any state, and many states do have laser authority, the schools are conducting laser labs and educating their students on this technology and technique. I was able to fire a laser myself at a fake eye, and we should all be very grateful it was a fake eye, because I could not hit the eye. That's how I don't want to say difficult, I guess is perhaps the word, but the fine motor skills and the technique and knowing what you're aiming at is very important, and I failed miserably. So that was a really, really cool opportunity, though. And again, I'm very gracious to Western and Dean Hoppy and her team for hosting me that day. The board's newsletter, The Spectacle, was released in spring 24, or I should say earlier this year. In April 16th was the date it was released. As we always do, we distributed it via listserv and on our social media account. We've also, as we talked about at our last meeting, we've pulled out some items from this document, from this newsletter, and tried to market them a little bit more. One of those items was the eyeglass donation effort that we discussed at the last board meeting. The spring newsletter contains that article with those links in terms of how do you donate. We have also put that information out on social media, and thank you to DCA for helping us create some cool graphics for that. We have ourselves, and credit to Jolie Walker, our enforcement manager, for the great idea and creativity, because I don't have that bone in my body. We now have a box in our office, public counter, for eyeglass donations as well, and are working to get ourselves on that list. We actually noticed that list that we all talked about at our last meeting doesn't appear to include any Sacramento locations. And so, again, as I just said, we now have a box in our office and are hopeful that we'll get ourselves added to that list. So thank you to the members for that great idea on that topic. We also, in that spring newsletter, published our list of DEIB, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging CE courses, something we've talked about at prior meetings. Staff researched a list of courses in that area, that topic area, and we have published this both on our website, in our newsletter, and put it out on social media as well. I'm hopeful that licensees and others will see these courses and take them. And so again, wanted to update the board on that as well. A couple more updates. Our law and regulations book, another item that we've talked about at prior meetings, just to catch up some of the newer members. Our current law and regs book has not been updated since 2020. There have been significant law changes since that time, and so it's not helpful to our applicants and those who are needing to study for the law exam if they don't have a document and a resource that contains the most up-to-date information. So we have been working with DCA to execute a contract to get this document updated, and I'm happy to report that that contract was executed earlier this month. So we expect to have no more than a 6-month process to produce this revised law and regs book, and if that timing is correct, we should have it done this year, and that'll be helpful for all licensees and applicants, but especially those folks that would be taking the law exam in the fall, winter, and spring of next year. And final update on here is, again, just I'm very humbled by this. I want to say a big thank you to President Wong, who I believe had a role in facilitating and nominating me for this, and as well as Arbo. And then, certainly want to give a thank you to Dr. Lewenda's family. What I'm talking about here is a former board member who passed away, was it a year ago? A little over a year ago. And his family made a donation to Arbo to help. Arbo is the Association of Regulatory Boards of Optometry. All boards of optometry are a partner of this organization, including our board. And as I understand it, the donation that was made was specifically to help facilitate boards traveling to the annual meeting, something that has been challenging, I think, for this board to have regular attendance at, given cost and other dynamics. But very, very gracious to be awarded this travel scholarship. So I will be going to Nashville, Tennessee, Father's Day weekend to participate in the Arbo National Conference. I'm very much looking forward to that. I said national conference, I should say annual meeting. Very much looking forward to participating in that. I will be a voting delegate on behalf of the board at that meeting, so expect a future update regarding my attendance and the work that was conducted there. So that's my update for item 9A. Happy to take any questions or comments from the board.
Member Kleppa here. I do have one comment and a couple questions. First, I urge you to try the barbecue when you're in Tennessee. It's wonderful.
Duly noted.
Yeah, thank you. As far as the questions on the executive chart, we have the one opening in the administrative unit that you're seeking someone to fill. Are the other vacancies being left unfilled for a reason, or are they also in process?
Great question, Member Kleppa. So the other vacancies, with the exception of 2.5 of them, and I'm not trying to be confusing here. We have one position, if you look at the org chart, that is a 0.5, which means it's a half-time position. So we have 2.5 positions that are, I'm going to exclude from what I'm about to say. All of the other positions are being purposely held vacant for salary savings, given our fund condition. Because we are holding these positions vacant, we are realizing salary savings, which is keeping our total expenditures around that 3 million, 3.1 million. And since we know we're only bringing in about 2.6, that's an ongoing, 400,000, 500,000 structural deficit. If we fully were staffed up, that 3.1 million number would be closer to 4, and our budget problem is that much worse. So as I've talked about at prior meetings, this is a delicate balance. You can't just keep positions open for salary savings at the expense of jeopardizing your operations and your timelines and your other mandates that you must abide by. So far, we have been successful over the last 2 years in keeping these vacancies vacant, realizing those salary savings, and having no negative impacts to our operations. And in fact, the opposite has happened. Our licensing times are better, our enforcement work is better, so on and so forth. So it's a balance, but at the moment, it's a balance that we're able to achieve.
Okay, so I probably just didn't quite understand. I know you said some are being kept open, some are being filled. Can you break down which is which? I know the administrative unit staff services analyst position is currently being advertised. Are the rest of them, because you seem to break it down, some you're holding, some are not. I wasn't quite sure which is which. Maybe I misunderstood.
No, I can be specific. So the vacant BCP position under licensing unit and the vacant BCP, the 2 vacant BCP positions under the licensing unit are actually going to disappear from our org chart. We are removing these positions effective July 1. So that is a total of 1.5 positions, right? Because one of them is a 0.5. There is 1 position in the enforcement unit, the other BCP. It is also going to be going away effective July 1. So that's 2.5 positions that will be removed from the org chart effective July 1. You might wonder, or other board members might wonder why. A BCP stands for Budget Change Proposal. It's a mechanism that we engage in to seek additional resources, such as positions. And the BCPs for those 2.5 positions had limited term funding. So the funding for those positions has run out. A decision was made by me that we did not need to seek reauthorization for those positions in terms of the funding. And so those 2.5 positions will disappear from the org chart July 1. The remaining vacancies, with the exception of the policy analyst position, we do not intend to fill at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Pruden from our board members in the room or online?
Okay, I'll just move right on to 9B. This is the enforcement program update. Thank you to our enforcement manager, Jolie Walker, for putting this item together for us. You have statistics along with this item. So I will walk us through not the stats at first, but just the memo. One item we want to inform the board about is that we are in the process of attempting to coordinate a DAG, a Deputy Attorney General Liaison training. This is something that I don't think this board has had in quite a while, if at all. It's something that I've learned that most boards tend to do once a year, is to have a Deputy Attorney General come in, give a top to bottom, side to side review of the formal discipline process and what that looks like. And I think it would be very helpful and beneficial, especially for our new members who may be less familiar with that aspect of your role as a board member. So we're hopeful that we'll have that scheduled for the August meeting. Another exciting update and something that we've talked about in our prior meetings in this area is the help that we need as a board for subject matter experts. Just as a brief background, we use subject matter experts in 2 ways. for our licensing exam development, but also for reviewing the more complex, difficult cases that staff doesn't have expertise on. These are more your quality of care, for example, type of cases. We had a very low number of subject matter experts, and that, in our estimation, didn't seem to serve the board well. So we had done some outreach and recruitment in this area. And in this last quarter, we brought on 3 new subject matter experts. So very excited and proud to do that and get them up and running. We also have increased our CE audit sample rate, moving forward from 5% to 7%. I almost gave my audit staff a headache there and a heart attack when I said 10. From 5% to 7%, this is just a goal. We don't have any mandate that we audit a specific percent, but just a goal that we're trying to stretch ourselves a little bit here. We're struggling, to be honest. In the past, we've struggled in the past to achieve the 5, but as our process is being refined and getting better, we're being more successful in our sample rate, and again, are increasing it from 5 to 7. On the next several pages in your packet, you have the stats. And so you have not just the listing of the citations, but you also we move into the statistics. I won't spend a lot of time here talking about the statistics, except to just point out one item on the optometry side, which is if you just look at the numbers, with knowing that we still have 1 entire quarter to go, right? So we are not reporting April, May, and June yet in this packet. We're just reporting 3 quarters worth of data. Our year-to-date complaints on the optometry side are higher. That we are at 295 through quarter 3, whereas all of last year, with 4 full quarters reported, we did 213. And we have some idea as to why these numbers are up. One is an increase in the CE audits. That's one explanation. As this board knows, we've talked a lot about CE, and so those numbers, some of these numbers are reflective of the audit work that we're doing. There are also more unlicensed. If you look at the categories, you'll see 60 unlicensed, unregistered complaints year to date versus only 6 in all of last year. We've talked previously at board meetings about some of the work we were doing with our delinquent FNPs, for example, fictitious name permits that was hard to determine whether they were still operating or not. They were delinquent. And so a lot of the increase in this unlicensed, unregistered category is a result of that work, trying to get our delinquent FNPs back into compliance, or not just delinquent ones, but ones that we have found through staff research that are operating, that don't hold any FNP permit from us. So I just wanted to point that out, that through 3 quarters of the year, you do see an increase in complaints, but they're reflective of things that are more internally driven and less a reflection of what's happening out in the regulated community. So I just wanted to point that out, but happy to answer any questions from the members and take any comments regarding the enforcement update.
Member Kleppa again, sorry to keep bothering you, Executive Director. A couple questions on Board Agenda Item 9BI, the statistical report. I think that's what you were referencing, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Vault Health, I don't remember seeing that before. Maybe I just missed it. What does that reference? Under Probation Statistics Report, 2nd section, Vault Health.
Yeah, Jolie, correct me if I'm wrong here. I believe Vault Health is for our probationers that have to undergo drug and alcohol testing, biological fluid testing. Sorry.
All right. So we've had none of that essentially in the last year.
Correct.
Okay.
We only have one in that program, if you will, at all.
Okay. And the closing period may have improved, but you'll have to speak to that. The amount of days under investigation seems to have dropped on average. Am I seeing that correctly?
Can you specify for me which specific PM you're
I would
referring?
look- Okay, for instance, under statistics report optometry program, then if you go down a few boxes, there was a citation intake or a citation category,
Oh,
citation.
yes, okay.
Average data close, year to date 91, and then if you go over and you break it down by quarter, it's 290. But it's dropped significantly from 548 in quarter one, right? So
Yes.
we're doing better.
Yes.
If I'm reading that correctly, the staff is doing much better closing it faster. Am I right in that?
Yeah, I would say that's fair. I just always like to point out, this is just a personal problem perhaps, but average is such a inherently flawed statistical measure, or it can be, right? It doesn't, for example, tell you a full picture about the tails, right, on either side. So most of these citations, or many of these citations, are CE, which generally go quicker in terms of the process. But we also have some older cases that we've closed, some older citations that we've issued. And so that's why, for example, you see a year-to-date number that's 290 compared to last year. Year-to-date was only 91. Most of those citations last year, I think 16 of the 17 were CE. And so again, those are quicker, right? Just the overall process is faster and quicker. But for non-CE citations, where there may have been investigations, where there may have been work that we did with DCA and our investigatory partners at DCA, those cases can take a long time before we even get to issuing the citation, before the citation ever gets resolved. So there's no other way that we can break this down, because we have to follow DCA's PM targets and cycles here. But I just want to point that out, that when we say citations, they're not all created equal, right? Different types of citations for different activity or different wrongdoing, if you will, the timelines that are reflected can be very different.
Okay. The explanation you gave just made me a little confused in reading the statistics I'm seeing. So could you walk me through it? Again, the citations box.
Sure.
Average days to close, I see 91, and then I'm over in the fiscal year breakdown quarter by quarter. Are we switching from days to number of citations between?
No, these are all average days.
Okay. All right. So 548 in quarter one, 197 in quarter two, 124. So it's dropping quarter by quarter as we go forward, right?
Yeah, and we looked at why quarter one was so high, and the reason why was because those were some older cases that finally got resolved, that resulted in a citation being issued. So the CE citations don't take almost 2 years or a year and a half, 548 days. These were older cases that had longer investigations, and yeah, that's why you see the average days starting to drop.
Okay, which is a positive trend, right?
Agreed. Yeah.
Okay. So I just want to be sure I'm seeing that the positive trend is there, and therefore it's kudos to staff and yourself for getting us farther down that road.
Yeah.
I think is that the only section that deals with time under investigation, or am I missing something?
Well, no, it's not the only category that deals with time under investigation. A citation is not formal discipline. And so we have other measurements on this report that do measure formal discipline. Almost as a rule of thumb, formal discipline should take longer than a citation. Formal discipline involves a lot more steps, involves the DAGs, and can involve hearings, so on and so forth, where citations don't generally involve that.
Okay, and is that broken out separately in a different set of statistics other than the citation box?
Yeah, it's in this report. PM4, cycle time discipline, average number of days to close cases transmitted to the AG for formal disciplinary action. We've had 2 all fiscal year that we're reporting.
Okay, I see that there. So average number of days, quarter two, again, I don't know if I'm reading this correctly. Total cycle time, 673 year to date, quarter two, 520, year to date, 173. How should I better understand how those numbers work together?
I would view it in that we don't have a lot of formal discipline, which is a good thing, and that our cycle time is improving, which is also a good thing.
All right, we'll take the win then. Thank you, Executive Director.
Any other comments or questions on the enforcement stats? We will move on to the next part of the enforcement stats, which is just the CE audit report. This is something that we promised the legislature that we would report at every meeting, and so that's why you see it. We had an extensive conversation about this topic at our February meeting regarding the pass rate and how we all feel that that should be higher and as close to 100% as it possibly can be. You will see some improvement in quarter three that we're reporting here. The pass rate was 72% for the quarter three. That compares to a 68% for the prior quarter. We're still below where we were, excuse me, we're still below where we were for last year, which was an 86% pass rate. So we're continuing to do our audits, and we will continue to report the statistics in the board meeting materials as we have here. All right, with that, I will move on to agenda item 9C. This is the examination and licensing program report. I want to give a thank you to Randy Love, who's our administration and licensing manager, for putting this item together for us. As we always do here, we always report the breeze updates that we've been working on. This last quarter has been, a heavy implementation for MOO and just getting ready for that. But in addition to that, we've also been updating some inaccurate error messages on our application and forms, especially on the renewals. We're working on there's an error message that commonly tells people that they haven't passed their NBEO, which is always very confusing for people because they're like, well, I'm licensed. What do you mean I haven't passed my NBEO? And so we get a lot of questions about that error message and its inaccuracy. So we're just working on updating those inaccurate error messages so they provide better information. We also, and this is one I'm really happy to have done, our renewal notices that go out to every renewing licensee are intended to provide very helpful and clear information in terms of what you owe, when you owe it by, and what you will owe if you don't pay it by the date that you owe it by. And we discovered that some of that information was invisible. It was printed in white ink on white paper. And so when we discovered that, we quickly got to work with the DCA folks and the Breeze folks to correct and rectify that. And now renewal notices do show the correct, they show the fee amount, and they show what the delinquency date would be and what the delinquency fee would therefore be. So very, very important that we send out, truthful, accurate, informative information to our licensees. So glad to have that one done. As I mentioned at the top, it's been heavy MOO implementation. So meetings every week, trying to build the IT business processes for that. The other future Breeze update that we have relates to our fee increase. So as a reminder, July 1st this year, our fees will go up for initial licensure as well as renewal for both optometry and opticianry. We have sent out a few listservs and social media messages about this. So this is for any renewing licensees. You have until July 1 to get that renewal in and still pay the existing fees. Effective July 1, that renewal fee will increase. So if you are a August expiring licensee, for example, you have your renewal application open right now. If you pay it now, you'll pay the current fee. If you wait until July 1, you'll pay the new fee. As a reminder, the renewal fee for optometry is $425. There are some additional fees that we don't control, for example, cures, but the fee for us is $425 and it will be going up to $500 on July 1. So just a call to all renewing licensees that may have open renewals to get that submitted before July 1 and enjoy a low introductory rate on that renewal. Just moving on to the statistical review for the third quarter. This is something we started reporting at maybe 2 meetings ago, but the letter of verification is a very common item that our licensees will reach out and inquire about and try to obtain for seeking licensure in another state or credentialing or other purposes. We moved that process online. Last year was an entirely paper process. It now is online on Breeze with an application, so on and so forth. We received 50 of these requests in the third quarter. We also processed 28 applications for a retired volunteer status. And then just moving on in attachment A, displays the licensing applications that we've received by quarter for the overall year, as well as for the prior year. I don't generally spend a lot of time here, but just for the new members, you will notice if you look at, for example, the optometrist, which is at the very top of this attachment. If you look at the second row, which is the optometrist license received and approved, you might wonder, how did you receive 259 but approve 417 in 1 year? And that's a direct result of the licensing process reforms and improvements that we've made and we've discussed extensively at these board meetings, where we took our 90-day average down to under a week. And so we operate on a fiscal year that begins July 1 and ends June 30. And all of our optometrists graduate now. Essentially every school in America, optometry school in America, has graduated its 2024 cohort, and we're receiving applications. And so everything we receive and approve between now and June 30 counts in the current fiscal year. Therefore, everything after that would be in the future fiscal year. So we approved so many more than what we received last year, because many of those that we were approving were ones that we had received in the prior year, but didn't approve until the subsequent year. Over the next year, 2 years, maybe 3, you'll start to see these numbers equalize a little bit as our process, as our reformed process hopefully holds up and we maintain that under 1 week average. So I just wanted to point that out to the members. If you move to the next attachment, which is attachment B, you'll see just the breakdown as of May 1st for the total population by license type as well as status. So that's always a helpful visualization there. And then the attachment C is just a graphical, visual representation of the work that we've been doing. I talked at the last meeting about the very first item here, which is the exam request. So all optometrist applicants have to go through what's called a Part 1, which is passing the CLRE, the California Law and Regulations exam. And if you happen to fail that exam under current business processes, you have to have a 6-month waiting period. And so if you waited until March, April, May to take that exam and failed, it's October, right? It's the fall before you could sit for it again. Meanwhile, the bulk of your colleagues have passed that exam and they're off licensed and working. So we have spent a lot of time over the last year and a half of trying to do outreach to the schools and our partners to really encourage applicants to take the exam earlier. We've been telling people to take it in the fall, winter, December, January. And so you see that here. You see that on these graphs. You see a much higher spike in December and January than we had in the year prior. You still see a big, and in fact, a higher number of folks taking the exam in March and April. So that tells me I still have more work to do to encourage those folks to take it even earlier. I know the students they got a lot of pressure. They got a lot of exams and board exams and other things going on. We're also working on, and hopefully we'll have future announcements to make about efforts that we're making to reduce down that waiting period. which is currently again at 6 months. And then again, just going through the stats, you'll see the initial licenses that we've been issuing. Apologies that it looks like some of the months got cut off here, but I can tell you don't have May reported on this graph because it was as of May 1st. But so far in the month of May, we're at the last day of the month, we've done about 70 initial applications this month. So that's a big number for 1 month, and we'll expect to do a similar number in June. And then if this year is anything like last year, we will most likely be done with almost all of the initial grads by early July. In years past, that was more like August and September. So just continuing our process there. The staff just continue on to report our fictitious name permits, and then they go into the optician side as well with initial apps for RDOs and the individual spectacle and contact lens dispensers. So those are the board licensing stats. I'm happy to take questions and comments from the members.
Any comments from our board members in the room? Any comments from our board members that are online? Well, I just wanted to applaud the licensure staff and you for the amazing licensing time period. It's been amazing how it's changed in the past year. So kudos.
Thank you. I guess just piggyback on that, we'll say one thing about that we've recently discovered, which we're going to have to fix as well. Maybe this is a future Breeze update. Our process automatically sends to an applicant 2, 3, 4 days after they apply an email, if we have it, or a letter that tells them we've received your application and you need to complete fingerprinting, NBEO, so on and so forth. That letter is confusing now because most often by the time that letter has been received by somebody, we've already licensed them. We're under a 1-week average. So we've had a handful of people in the last week who, I'm confused. I got this email that says I owe this, that, and the other, but then I go on Breeze and it says I'm licensed. Yeah, we did. We licensed you that fast that we couldn't stop the letter from going out. So we're going to have to work with the Breeze team on fixing that letter and getting it updated so it's not confusing to folks. But yeah, that's just an example of the work that the team's doing to get these things approved as fast as we can.
You guys are too efficient.
Check online.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is there any public comment from? Is there any comment from our members online? Nope. Any comment from members of the public in the room? And any comment from the public on the phone?
We are open for public comment via WebEx. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial-in users dial *3 to raise a hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. And just for clarification, is public comment on A, B, and C, or is it just C?
Yes.
All right. Public comment on A, B, and C. Just a couple more seconds to get that hand up. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue with the agenda?
Yes, please. Just one final item in the EO Executive Officer update, which is item 9D, regulatory update. Just give a couple updates on a few of these regulations. We talked about MOO, Mobile Optometric Office, earlier today, and we now have an update to what you have in your board packet in terms of the comments. So we will be working with regulatory counsel on that package to continue working on it and moving it forward. The second item is our implementation of AB 458, which is really our home residence permit regulation. This is an important public policy and important that we implement this to also expand the availability of optometric care to the homebound. We submitted this package to DCA on May 2nd, and we'll be looking forward to hopefully approval from DCA soon Following that expected approval, we will move the package to our agency, where we hope to get approval there. And following that approval, we will commence the formal rulemaking process. So that's the update for home residents. The optometry disciplinary guidelines are the next one. This is a package that had been board approved 5 years ago in 2019. We had not been, the board had not done a lot of substantial work on this package when I took over my position. And recent conversations that I've been a part of regarding disciplinary guidelines are going to require that this text and package needs to come back before the board. Not just because it's been 5 years and it's and the length of time, but there have been some important case law and other statutory legal issues that moving forward with this language would be problematic. Just give one example, which is the tolling. We have tolling language. So if you're on probation and you move out of state, there's a process to toll your probation. There's language in that tolling section that raises due process concerns, and that other boards have been either threatened lawsuits regarding or have been sued on. So learning that, we will be taking this package back to the staff level, reworking it, and needing to bring it back to a future board meeting. No new update on item 4, which is the optician program omnibus regulation changes. We reported at the last meeting that this one will also need to be reworked, revised, and come back to the board, most principally because one of the items that was in it had to do with optician fees. And we separated those optician fees from that regulation and pursued a standalone fee regulation, which again takes effect on July 1 of this year. The next item is the dispensing optician disciplinary guidelines, and the same comment exists here for that I mentioned just a moment ago for the optometry disciplinary guidelines. Now, these were disciplinary guidelines that I had been working on and had submitted some rough drafts to legal on. But again, same concerns exist here with the optometry ones. There's some language that needs to be revised to avoid any potential legal issues. And then the final update that we have here is requirements for the glaucoma certification. There's no further update on this one. It's still a regulation we haven't yet started at this time. So I'm happy to take comments or questions from the members regarding item 9D, the regulatory update.
Oh, this is Member Linden. I just want to, thank you for all the progress that you've made on getting through all of these huge reg packages. I just remember, if we looked at this agenda item earlier on, it was a very, very long list with no progress being made. And so just like with enforcement and licensing regulations as well, just thank you guys all for making such great progress.
Thank you. Yeah, we've been able to drop 2 from this list since I started, which was CE and then fees. And then hopefully MOO will be successful soon, and home resident. We just keep going, right? We just keep going. So next board meeting, you'll see RF added to this list as a new board approved regulation package. So appreciate the board's help and support and assisting us moving these items forward.
Any other comments from board members in the room or board members online?
Public comment.
Can we go ahead and get public comment from public in the room? And there are no hands raised here. And is there any public comment from those on the phone?
We are open for public comment on 9D. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial-in users dial *3 to raise a hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. As a reminder to our mobile device users, if you're having trouble finding that hand button, you may need to hit the ellipses button, that's a ... at the bottom, and cycle through one of 3 pages. We're going to take just a couple more seconds to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue with the agenda?
Yes, thank you very much. Okay, so at this point now, it is 12:50. We are going to break for lunch. How long do we want for lunch, guys? An hour? Okay, we're going to take lunch for an hour, which puts us back here at 1:50 p.m. Right? 1:50 p.m. we will come back for the rest of our meeting. All right, it is now 1:51. We are going to get started again. We are back from lunch, and we were going to, before we get started, let's go ahead and do a roll call vote to establish quorum one more time.
Bragg,
Present.
Member Clemens,
Present.
Member Dawson,
Present.
Member Kleppa,
Present.
Member Linden, present. Dr. Pruitt,
Here.
Member Sims, Member Sue,
Present.
Dr. Garcia,
Present.
and Dr. Wong.
Present. Okay, we have quorum. Thank you. So we will be just moving on to item number 11, which is 10. Oh, I'm sorry. Item number 10, which is update and possible discussion and action on our 2023-2024 legislation, which will be done by Mr. Pruden.
Thank you, President Wong and members. Hope our bellies are full from lunch. Agenda item 10, update and possible discussion and action on 2023-24 legislation. We have items A through J on this item. However, only items C, D, H, I, and J have had no prior action taken by this board. So the other items A, B, E, F already have board action and positions, and there have been no further changes on those bills for us to consider. Just as a brief background, just again for some of our newer members, the legislature reconvened on January 3rd of this year, and they entertained the introduction of new bills until February 21st. We, at the staff level, were monitoring these bill introductions for any bills that may, impact or otherwise require us to engage on. And then on April 5th, our Legislation and Regulation Committee met and discussed and made recommendations on several of these bills. That's their role, right? The Reg Committee's role is to provide those recommendations for the full board and to assist staff in coming up with those positions. Subsequent to that meeting, there was a bill that we identified that had not been discussed on that Reg Committee, and that was SB 451 by Ashby, and it is on our list to discuss today. Again, for the benefit of newer members, the next few pages of your packet for item 10 are from our administrative manual and just speak to what the legislative process in California looks like, the role that board members have and play in terms of taking positions. And then there's also a graphic in here about the life cycle of a piece of legislation. But unless there's objections by the board, I'm going to start with the items that we have not yet considered and taken positions on, which would be item C, AB 1991 by Assemblymember Bonta, license and registrant records. In your packet, you have an analysis for this bill, as well as the committee analysis produced by the legislature, as well as the bill text. The committee recommendation from our April 5th Reg Committee was a neutral position. But let's talk a little bit about what this bill does, what is intended to do, I should say. This bill would require healing arts boards, including our board, to collect workforce data on our licensees and registrants. And it requires this data to be collected at the time of registration renewal. This is changing slightly what already happens. For those of you who are licensees, board member licensees, you will know that on your renewal right now, you are voluntarily asked a lot of these workforce questions. Essentially, all this bill is doing is changing the voluntary asking to a mandate that these questions be filled out. In your packet, it specifies the information that is collected. Again, it's demographic information, but also workforce. So one of the pieces of information includes the anticipated year of retirement. Our board and all of the healing arts boards in DCA are in a partnership with another state department, the Department of Healthcare Access and Innovation. And this data is provided to them, and that department produces workforce studies and analyses to help inform policymakers regarding the state's health workforce. There is no impact to the board. Should this bill become law, we would be working with DCA, as would the other boards, to make process changes in terms of IT and other business process changes to now make these questions required to be answered on the renewal. Again, the committee recommendation was neutral, and for the board purpose, we need to take we have the possibility to entertain a position at the board level today. So happy to take questions and comments from the members, and also happy to entertain a motion on AB 1991.
Member Klepp, I have a question. If this legislation is adopted, can a licensee still decline to answer in any category?
No, they're going to be required to answer these questions.
All right, so there wouldn't be an option of, for instance, if it's a race-based question, white, black, or none of the above. You can't get out of it in any way. You have to self-identify and you have to use the categories provided, right?
That's my understanding.
Okay. I wasn't on the committee that evaluated this, so I would like to give a view. Is this the appropriate time for that?
Oh, when did you said the committee discussed this on April?
April 5th.
Oh, because I think the bill was amended after that.
It very possibly could have been amended subsequent to that date.
Just looking at it now, because I didn't read this earlier, but it looks like it says, it says if they don't answer, an application can't be denied.
Correct. So if they want to maintain their license, they will have to answer it. If they don't answer the question, we will be, sorry, I misspoke. You're right. We will not be able to deny the renewal for them not answering the question.
Oh, okay. So they can't essentially decline to answer without a negative outcome. Is that correct?
I'm going to double check the language.
I am looking at the language right now, and it says a board described under the previous shall not deny an application for license or registration renewal solely because the licensee or registrant failed to provide any of the information listed.
Yes. So Member Klepper, you are correct. They would not suffer a penalty in that way. I think that where our board and other DCA boards are going to have to work with DCA is what does this look like in terms of the IT and business process? Right now, the questions you can decline to answer and therefore move forward with your renewal. Perhaps the application will stay the same, but I think future conversations will have to happen with DCA to figure out how our applications may need to change to ask this question, while also still allowing for the fact that folks won't suffer a denial of their renewal for not answering it.
Okay. That would have been my concern. I've had to fill out many forms which ask these questions. I find them somewhat intrusive. So the fact that you can decline to answer without penalty would always be my preference, because while I understand there is a useful need to gather the information, it has to be balanced against the privacy of the respondent.
You remember, Clubber, you're out. That's a great point you bring up. Even currently now, under the optional scheme, it's every once in a while our board does get some complaints, if you will, from renewing licensees about perhaps the sensitivity of some of these categories, like you mentioned, race being one of those questions that is asked. So that's certainly possible that would continue or even increase moving forward.
All right. That was my only concern. If, as it seems, it can be configured in a way where someone is not pressured into or required to respond if they feel their privacy is being invaded, then I would have no objection. If they simply just trying to, I guess, gather the information if possible, but yet not penalize someone for not providing it, to me, it doesn't really change very much. So a neutral response would then be appropriate here. But unless I'm misunderstanding the situation.
No, I think you're correct, and I appreciate you and member Linden. Again, the bill was amended subsequent to our committee discussion. So thank you for that. So we're still on AB 1991. We can continue discussing it. We could entertain a motion for a position. We certainly don't have to take any position either. Yeah, the board, in terms of positions, the board has, the question was what type of positions may we take? In terms of positions, the board has a variety of positions it could take. It could support the bill. It could support if amend the bill. It could be neutral on the bill. It could be neutral if amended. It could oppose it, or it could oppose unless amended. Or it could simply do nothing and just can keep watching it.
Well, my thought would be either neutrality or keep watching, because it doesn't seem to be effectively changing the rule in any important way. So either a neutral position or no position, to me, would seem the most, the best response.
You could make that motion.
Enough? I don't want to speak for anyone else. Does any other member want to weigh in on this? We have the recommendation of the committee of a neutral position. My thoughts, either we do nothing or we stick with the neutral position. Any thoughts from any other committee member?
Member Clemens?
A clarifying question. I tend to agree with Member Kleppa that given that there are no penalties to practitioners who choose to not answer these questions, that it does not change anything of substance. But I am curious, given this is a workforce-based bill as opposed to anything else, is asking the anticipated year of retirement a new piece of information we are going to be collecting? Because if that's the case, I would see this as valuable. If we're already asking it and it's already optional to do it, and the change in the law is to require that the information be gathered, but there is still no penalty for those who don't, I would wonder why this is necessary at all. But if we are collecting new information about anticipated retirement date, I can see why that would be very helpful, even if many people choose not.
I am looking
Respond.
at the language of the bill right now. So it seems that anticipated year of retirement is already part of law.
That's correct. That's an existing question that's asked.
Okay. I am one of the newer members here, but I am just curious whether staff or council could explain if there is no penalty for those who choose not to respond, and we are asking for the same information, and the bill simply moves the collection of this information from optional to required, but it's not really required. Am I missing something here as to what this bill seeks to do and how it seeks to do it?
So it is required for certain boards. So the language I spoke of earlier references another section. There's another area, though, that includes the Board of Registered Nursing, the Board of Vocational Nursing, Psychiatric Technicians, and Physicians Board, and Respiratory Care Board. So the language that indicates that no adverse action can come from now for failing to provide that information wouldn't apply to those boards. So while it is required for all boards to collect information, unless you're one of the boards I just listed off, there's no adverse action that would happen. Does that make sense?
But we're not, optometry is not listed on
Nope.
that list.
So yeah, so for optometry's purposes, we're not listed as part of the ones that would have an adverse action, but that might answer Member Cleveland's question of what is the purpose of this bill and what is it doing?
So if you think about the way our renewals work now, we're already asking these questions. And the way you can get out of it is declining to state. And I believe you have to decline to state to each one of the questions that are asked. Anticipate a year of retirement, race, so on and so forth, right? The proposed text in the bill would make that no longer voluntary and make you have to provide the information. So we would probably move toward including some of that language on our renewals. You shall provide answers to these questions. We know what it says in the next clause, which says notwithstanding the requirement that you provide the information, we can't deny it. But we would still want to be clear on our application for renewal that you must do it. Right now, we can't say you have to do it because it's declined to state. Does that make sense?
Your response makes perfect sense.
Okay.
I think that I'm able to deal with this bifurcation in the intent and the actual practicality of it by saying, it does not apply to optometry. As for me, I would be happy to remain in an observational posture or remain neutral on it, as it does not change anything for this board.
Okay.
Also, as a Member Kalapa, just as a reminder, the board only would need a motion if it wants to take a stance. If it just wants to continue observing, we do not need a motion.
My only comment would be, should this bill pass and come into law, I would hope we could come up with a little broader language than what the executive director suggested. Because shall language is an absolute, but I would hope we would put something to the effect of, you should, or something like that, respond. However, there'll be no negative connotation if you don't. Otherwise, they don't know the exceptions in the law. They'll compelled to act because they feel they would get some sort of negative action against them if they don't, and they don't want to risk it. So it would all depend on the language we use should this be enacted, and I would hope our language would be a little different than what was just suggested. Otherwise, we're going to have people feeling compelled to do something they're not compelled to do.
I appreciate the comments. And again, I would just circle back to an earlier comment, which is we would not be acting alone here. This is a change that would impact the renewal applications for all of our sister healing arts boards too. We would be working with DCA to try to be uniform in terms of how we are asking this question, just like the other boards. For a couple of reasons, but just one that I would offer would be there are licensees that hold licenses across different boards. And so that's one reason why you would want to have some continuity in terms of the question, or similarity or sameness to the question. So we would have to wait until this bill became law and see what it actually changed, and then we would work with DCA to figure out what questions in our application for renewal may need to be tweaked or adjusted.
I certainly understand if we have some licensees who hold multiple licenses, but as council just indicated, there are something like 4 boards where it would be mandatory and ours it would not. So I think DCA would have to come up with different language depending on the board, because it affects the boards and their licensees differently unless they're dual licensees. So I think new language might be required for us versus others in any event. I was simply noting that because given what was just explained to me as to the effect of this language and the fact that depending on how you phrase it, people may feel compelled, even though the law doesn't require it, I would have grave concerns about that. And I would hope we could develop language that threads the needle a little better rather than gives an implication of being compelled to do something that isn't actually required.
I appreciate the comments, and we'll consider them as this bill is moving through the process. And if it is chaptered and becomes law, we'll have to evaluate what changes we may need to make. So it's at this point hard to say how the application would need to change. But as the proposed text indicates, this would be required information to be provided. So we would need language that instructs along those lines.
Can I ask council's input on this? Do we have any understanding of what kind of language this board might use if this type of law was passed? Would it be a compulsory type of language or an optional type of language, or has that analysis been done yet?
That analysis has not been done yet. I suspect this conversation is part probably putting the, what's the phrase, the cart in front of the horse at this point. At this point, the bill has just gotten to the Senate. It hasn't passed both chambers, hasn't fully moved through the Senate's committees. So if it is enacted into law, which is still an if, DCA would work with the boards affected to craft the language.
All right. My thought then would be that if other members are in agreement, we consider doing oppose unless amended, such that any board such as ours, which is not compelled to gather this information, be allowed to phrase the requirement in a way that it's voluntary and not compulsory.
The board certainly can take that position. I would, I think that would be an uphill battle for this board to try to accomplish such a change. Let's take a step back for a moment. This is all about data that is getting sent over to the Department of Healthcare Access and Innovation. And so if we were going down a design that we are opposing this bill to go back to the current state of play where it's voluntary, we may run into problems with that department. We may also run into problems with some of our other boards who are also going to be taking positions or engaging on this bill potentially. With the few exceptions that council mentioned, this bill impacts the majority of the healing arts boards at DCA. And my advice for the board would be that we would probably want to be consistent in with the position that we took, similar to what our other sister boards are doing. I don't know what positions other boards have taken on this bill. I'd be happy to do that research and report back. I'm not confident that many of them have taken an oppose unless amended position on this, but I can certainly look into it and report back on that front.
I think Member Clemens also wants to make a comment.
As the conversation has evolved and matured, I am wondering whether this is an instance of where the perfect can be the enemy of the good. The data collection and handling within DCA ideally should be uniform. And I think we have split about 3 levels of hairs down in the process here. And if government is asking licensees to take an action, but there is no downside to people not taking that action, government should not ask them to take that action. I've got 10 years of government service under my belt, and from working for people who set policy and working for people who implement policy. And I believe we are creating a situation, if this bill goes through, with differing penalties or lack of penalties for different agencies under a master agency. I think we are creating ourselves an enormous amount of work. So I would actually propose that the leadership of DCA and its member agencies talk about what all of them would like to do and have it be uniform, whether there are penalties for everyone who does not present this aggregated information, which according to the law cannot be used individually to identify any person, but gives workforce information over the long run and demographic information, which can be helpful to reach out to underserved communities. I believe it would make most sense for the author of this bill to hear from the DCA with one voice rather than 16 of them, so that DCA can implement this bill effectively and efficiently with one methodology instead of 2 or 6 or 16 of them. So I'd like to elevate the conversation back up to what are we trying to do? And let's all do it the same way, as opposed to allowing different agencies to set their own rules, which will only create more work that none of us need to do. Thank you.
Any other comments from, Ms. Linden?
I personally feel like at this point, I would be inclined to maybe just take a watch position on this bill. It does appear to affect us minimally because it doesn't impose any negative consequences. And as it's been mentioned, we are one of many other healing arts boards. I imagine if this bill were to pass, there would be some comprehensive look at what kind of, what does that actually mean and what would actually need to be changed. I don't think this affects us negatively. Personally, I think collecting more data about the health workforce is very valuable and beneficial. So I would actually support collecting this data. But yeah, I think as of now, maybe we just kind of see where it goes. It was recently amended out of the assembly. Who knows if it gets amended again? So yeah, that's where I stand.
Any other comments from any other members?
Not from member, but just from me as EO, I would just a couple of maybe additional thoughts from what I heard from Member Clemens and Member Linden. DCA works very closely with HCI and the Department of Healthcare Access and Innovation. That's a fairly new department. It used to have a different name. I think it was OSHPED, if I remember, Office of Statewide Health Planning and Development, I think is what it used to be called. And they have been this new department, HCI. I think we showed or talked about this at the committee meeting, putting out data and graphical visualizations on this workforce data, both geographically based off of race and gender and so on and so forth. And they're continuing to build that product, if you will. Optometrists are included in that data and displayed currently. Opticians are not yet, but are anticipated to be included in future updates. So just as an example of the work that is ongoing, DCA works very closely with HCI and continues to do so. There's quarterly meetings that happen, as I understand it, or frequent meetings that happen with DCA and HCI. I've participated in a few of them in the past, where HCI has kind of walked us through their data and their graphics and what they're doing. So I think this bill is an effort that's consistent with that collaboration and that work that's been ongoing. There's also been conversation about whether workforce data might in the future be expanded to the non-healing arts boards. So I think to the points that we've been talking about, these are fluid, ongoing conversations, and maybe it does make sense to just watch it at this point.
Does anybody else have any comments?
I'm not sure if we have a motion or a second yet.
We can wait to take public comment to the end of item 10.
Okay. Well, since I'm going to suggest, I'm not going to propose a motion, I'm going to suggest that since this bill is still in the early stages, I think it might be a good idea to have staff and Greg have you look and see what the other healing boards are thinking, and then maybe we bring this back to the table in August and we can kind of see what the general stance is for that. So at this point, I would suggest just we watch it and we don't take a position. Does anyone have another preference or another suggestion? I'm getting a lot of shaking heads. So for all of our members that are online, we currently are going to just watch it here. Do any of you have a different opinion? I'm going to take that as a no. So I think as of right now, we are just as a board going to watch this bill. All right, let's go on to the next one. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that work and research and collaborate with DCA and others and come back on that point. Really appreciate all that. Thank you, everybody. It's good feedback. Moving on, we'll go to the next bill. This is AB 2327 by Wendy Carrillo, Optometry Mobile Optometric Offices Regulations. This bill would require our board to adopt the regulations establishing the MOO program by January 1, 2026. Just give a quick background here. We were talking about MOO earlier, and the current MOO law requires this board to have implemented the regulations by Jan 1, 2023. So technically, we have not met that requirement. So this bill, AB 2327, would extend out the due date that we have to approve those regulations, to adopt them by 3 years to January 1st, 2026. It would also extend out the prohibition that currently exists, the safe harbor prohibition that currently exists that prevents the board from bringing an enforcement action against a mobile optometric office before the date of those regulations based solely on their affiliation with an approved school of optometry. And then the third thing the bill does is it would extend out the sunset date. We were talking earlier about the sunset date for our board. The mobile optometric office program itself has its own sunset date. That sunset date is presently July 1, 2025, but this bill would extend that repeal date out by a decade to July 1, 2035. I think we've talked extensively about the background of MOO, so I won't go into that unless I need to. But those are the three principal important things that this bill does. Gives us more time to finish the reg work that we're engaged on now, extends the safe harbor period to that same date, and extends out the life of the MOO program by 10 years. These are all very important provisions to ensure the future of the MOO program and to allow the board enough time to finish its rulemaking. The committee recommendation was support, and I'd be happy to entertain any questions or comments and/or a motion from the board on AB 2327.
Member Kleppa, given the prior presentations on this subject, it seems like a good motion to adopt and move forward with, in my opinion.
Any other comments from anybody? Mr. Kleppa, did you want to make that motion?
Sure. I make the motion. I'm just going to read off committee recommendation to support the bill, extending the MOO program out 10 years, allow for sufficient time for the program to exist, and provide clarity providers operating MOOs.
Can I get a second?
I second that.
And then Dr. Pruitt seconds it. Do I need to take public comment now? I'm going to ask for public comment from anyone in the hearing room. I see no raised hands. Public comment, please, for those on the phone.
We are open for public comment on the motion for AB 2327. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial in users, dial *3. And for our mobile device users, please click the ... the ellipses button if you're having trouble finding your hand button. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue with the motion?
Yes, please. Thank you. All right, and if we could get a roll call vote, Ms. Linden.
Okay, Dr. Bragg,
Aye.
Member Clemens,
Aye.
Member Dawson,
Aye.
Member Kleppa,
Aye.
Member Linden, aye. Dr. Pruitt,
Aye.
Member Sims,
Aye.
Member Sue,
Aye.
Dr. Garcia,
Aye.
and Dr. Wong.
Aye. All right, the motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving on to the next bill for discussion and possible action is SB 1451 by Ashby, Professions and Vocations. As I mentioned earlier, this was not a bill that was previously discussed at the April 5th committee meeting. We identified it after that meeting. This bill does a lot of things that don't impact optometry. So the analysis that you have in your packet only concerns the provisions of the bill that would interest our board. Existing law makes it a misdemeanor for a person who is not licensed as a physician and surgeon under the Act to use certain words, letters, and phrases or any other terms that imply that the person is authorized to practice medicine as a physician and surgeon. This bill would add the initials DO to the list of prohibited terms under that provision. The bill would prohibit a person from using the words doctor or physician, the letters or prefix doctor, the initials MD or DO, or any other terms or letters indicating or implying that the person is a physician and surgeon, or practitioner in a healthcare setting that would lead a reasonable patient to determine that the person is licensed as a medical doctor or DO. Just a little bit of background, as I think many of the licensed optometrists on this board probably know, In many years, there has been an apparent increase in legislative efforts around the country by state medical associations to enact what are referred to as not a doctor bills. There's a link in your electronic materials to the American Optometric Association, who has some information and material on this issue, where they say at least 7 states had such legislation introduced in 2023, and that this year there are at least 3, including California, with this bill. Now, the Medical Practice Act currently prohibits any person from practicing or advertising as practicing medicine without a license, and it does make this a misdemeanor for any unlicensed person to use the words doctor or physician. While the Medical Practice Act expressly reserves use of the words doctor or physician for actively licensed physicians, this provision does not comprehensively reflect the current state of law. And this is why the author has introduced this bill. According to the author, podiatrists, for example, are independently licensed by the Podiatric Medical Board, yet their formal title is Doctors of Podiatric Medicine. A similar issue exists with the California Board of Naturopathic Medicine. Optometrists, dentists, chiropractors, psychologists, and other practitioners possessing professional doctorates are also expressly authorized by law to use the term doctor. Doctor is also a commonly used honorific for those who have a doctoral degree. How does this impact the Board of Optometry? Again, optometrists in California are already limited in using the prefix doctor or DR, and this bill is not intended to further limit or otherwise prevent or prohibit optometrists from using these prefixes consistent with existing law. An optometrist who uses the prefix doctor or DR, doctor, without the correct suffix may have the license revoked or suspended. This is existing law found at Business and Professions Code section 3098, and it states the following. When the holder uses the title of doctor or DR as a prefix without using the word optometrist as a suffix to his or her name or in connection with it, or without holding a diploma from an accredited school of optometry, the letters opt-D or OD as a suffix to his or her name, it constitutes a cause to revoke or suspend his or her optometrist license. Subsequent to us identifying this bill, the author has committed to taking amendments that would specify that nothing in this bill is intended to change the existing authority that other providers, such as optometrists, presently have to refer to themselves as doctors, consistent with existing law. So that's a long way of saying that we've identified this bill as potentially having an impact to optometrists in the way that they refer to themselves. Subsequent to us identifying this bill, the author has committed to taking amendments that should make the issue moot. I'm not yet aware whether those amendments have happened, so I would recommend that we continue to watch the bill to ensure that those amendments do get put in place. And at that time, we can update the position as appropriate. Any questions or comments from the members?
Member Kleppa, I just have a question. You did mention PhDs in here somewhere as far as whether this act would apply to them. And how does this act shake out in that regard? Because it wasn't clear to me exactly how this act might or may not affect that individual.
I don't think that that this bill is intended to impact those who have doctoral degrees, a PhD in political science, for example. I'm not aware of any specific laws, practice acts, title protection that a doctor of political science holds under the law. So I don't believe that SB 1451 is intended at all to impact those folks. It's really trying to clarify the use of these terms for healing arts providers in health and medical facilities.
Okay, well then let's drill down a little bit into that area. If someone graduates from a university with a degree in optometry but doesn't get the license, would this affect their position and the terms they could use to describe themselves?
No, it would not. A person who holds a doctoral degree in optometry can refer to themselves as doctor, whatever their name is, OD, and they would be compliant with the law.
Okay, thank you. Just curious.
Any other comments from our members, board members? Board members online, do you have any comments? Any other comments? So I think at this point, we are just going to suggest that we continue to watch this bill. All right, thank you.
All right, we have two more. The next bill is SB 1468. Just trying to get there in my notes. All right, SB 1468 by Ochoa Bow and Roth, Healing Arts Board's informational and educational materials for prescribers of narcotics, federal 3-day rule. The author reason for this bill is to increase education and engagement among providers around how to confidently manage patients with opioid use disorder. This bill would require our board, the medical board, the dental board, the podiatric medical board, the veterinary medical board, the Board of Naturopathic Medicine, and the Board of Registered Nursing to develop and annually disseminate via the email address on file for each licensee informational and educational material regarding the 3-day rule, and would require the Medical Board of California to annually disseminate the material to acute care hospitals. The bill would also require the informational and educational material to be posted on each board's website. Let's talk about a little background about what the federal 3-day rule is. Under existing federal regulations, a practitioner is authorized to dispense narcotic drugs to a person for the purpose of initiating maintenance treatment or detoxification treatment, or both, even if that practitioner is not registered with the Federal Drug Enforcement Administration as a treatment program. Prior to August 2023, a limitation on this regulation included that, quote, not more than 1 day's medication may be administered to the person or for the person's use at one time. Such emergency treatment may be carried out for not more than 3 days and may not be renewed or extended. This became known as the 3-day rule. In December 2020, the President of the United States signed into law a bill directing the Attorney General to revise the 3-day rule to allow for practitioners to dispense a 3-day supply of narcotic drugs to one person for their one-time use for the purpose of initiating maintenance treatment or detoxification. The new rule became final on August 8th of 2023, and we've linked to it in the virtual materials. The purpose of the federal rule prior to the changes in 2023 were to allow the practitioner flexibility in emergency situations when confronted with a patient undergoing withdrawal. The drug commonly used in these situations is buprenorphine. I've gotten way better at saying that word. Sold under brand names Subutex and Suboxolone. And in those cases, it would not be practical to require practitioners to obtain a separate DEA registration as a narcotic treatment program. The exception in the law allowed for the practitioner to provide relief from these withdrawal symptoms while arranging care in a treatment program. Prior to August 2023, the 3-day rule meant that only 1 day's treatment could be provided for up to 3 days. Often presenting to emergency departments, patients would receive a 1-day supply of medicine and then would have to return to the emergency department to receive more medicine while they waited to be placed in treatment. The change to allowing 3 days to be dispensed at one time will mean the patient can make only one emergency room visit and return home with a 2-day supply while they wait for treatment. How does this bill impact the board? The bill requires the board to develop informational and education material regarding the 3-day rule and to disseminate it to licensees annually via the email address on file, as well as posting it on the website. The bill has a specific definition for prescriber, and this definition includes our optometrist licensees, because it is defined to be a person authorized to write or issue a prescription pursuant to Health and Safety Code Section 11150. That code section provides that no person other than specified healing arts providers, including optometrists, shall write or issue a prescription. Now, the optometrist scope of practice is found at Business and Professions Code Section 3041, and at subsections A5B, the only controlled substances that can be prescribed are codeine or hydrocodone with compounds and tramadol, limited to 3 days, with a referral to an ophthalmologist if pain persists. Buprenorphine is not one of these drugs, but it is commonly dispensed in emergency rooms where patients present with withdrawal symptoms. It may not be common for an optometrist to see these situations or patients at all. However, some optometrists may be working in medical or health facilities or be in community or other public health clinics where these situations may be more common. Staff is unsure the impact these broader policy changes have on the field of optometry, and so we took this to the committee in April for a discussion, and this has informed much of our analysis. CSBO, our board, is not authorized by law to require applicants and licensees to supply an email address, and we're not presently aware how many email addresses we have on file for our licensees. Therefore, we do not have an email address for every licensee. We do have a listserv that we would utilize as well to distribute this material. We would certainly post it on the website, and we would also distribute it to all of the email addresses that we do have. You will see in your packet of materials a fiscal analysis for this bill. This fiscal analysis was done prior to the current text of the bill, which now authorizes the material to be distributed electronically. This fiscal impact was on a prior version of the bill when we did not have the ability to disseminate the material electronically and believed that we were going to have to mail it out to the address of record. It would have costed our board about $18,000 to do that every year. So we're appreciative of the recent amendments that should mitigate or eliminate these fiscal impacts by allowing us, should the bill become law, to electronically send this material out. In terms of developing the material, we would certainly not want to develop this material on our own. We would be looking to partner with the other boards and DCA that are impacted by this. It would probably make sense to have standardized brochure or informational material sent out. Happy to entertain questions and comments from the board on this bill.
So there's no comments in the room. Are there any comments from the members online? Just going to watch. Okay. So at this point, we're just going to watch the bill.
Okay. And just moving on to the last one, we actually don't have to consider it. It's for SB 1485. This bill's no longer going to be moving forward. So I think we can skip it and at this point conclude agenda item 10.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask for public comment from members in the hearing room, from the public. There are no comments from the hearing room. Are there any comments from the public on the phone?
We are open for public comment via WebEx on all of agenda item 10. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial-in users dial *3 to raise a hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue with the agenda?
Yes, please. Thank you. Okay. We are now going to move on to item number 12, which is our closed session. Oh, I'm sorry. Item number 11, which is future agenda items. Are there any items the members wish to bring up for discussions as a future agenda item?
Member Kleppa, I don't know if it should be an agenda item or just a general request. We've talked at prior meetings about possibly scheduling a tour of an optometry school at some point during the period we hold a meeting. I've heard from other members some positive response to that idea. I do hope we can still do that at some point.
Thank you. I think that's a good idea too.
I just would say in the past, we have traveled and conducted one meeting a year generally at a school. pandemic has, made that situation difficult / impossible, but, we're beyond that now. So yeah, I think that is something we should work toward planning toward, and I look forward to doing that.
I think Member Clemens has,
Not an agenda item, but a housekeeping item. For the August meeting, I expect to be on a family vacation on the East Coast. So as we all figure out who's going to be where so we don't wreck our quorum, I'd like to claim one of the away game spots.
Mr. Pruden, can you remind us, what's our August date? All right.
I believe our August date is August 9. And then our
Yes.
December date is December 6th.
I have August 9 right now, which would be currently it's scheduled for Sacramento, and then December 6th.
Yes.
Just as a reminder for all of our board members for our next 2 meetings. Are there any other comments or items that members would wish to bring up for discussion for future agenda items? Members online, do you have any comments or items that you would like to bring up? All right, I'm going to ask for public comment for those in the audience in the hearing room. I have Ruby Garcia coming to the front.
I don't know how this is a future agenda item, but we are building a museum in our, everyone who's involved. And I would love the board to have some history in our mock museum. 2 years from now, we actually want to open the actual museum. And as far as visiting a school, we are working on Sac City for the opticianry, but I do have open in Ventura County, a beautiful training center there. And up the street, there is a hotel, but this is Ventura County. And then I'm really glad that I heard a little bit about, there are continuing education for diversity training, because I notice as we are placing our apprentices, that there's got to be some more awareness. There seems to be some resistance when we're trying to bring in candidates with diversity background. And it's kind of saddened my heart for that to happen. So I am working with Channel Islands University, a couple of professors, to see how we can come up with some continuing education about that.
Great, thank you. Is there any other public comment from those in the room? There's no other public comment for those in the room. Can I ask for public comments for those on the phone?
We are open for public comment on future agenda items. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial-in users dial *3 to raise a hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, would you like to continue with the agenda?
Thank you very much. I apologize, Member Sims. I believe you had your hand raised and you wanted to make a comment. Please go ahead.
Hi, no worries. I was just going to comment that the presentation that we had today was really great. So maybe we can incorporate something like that again in the future, especially if we're dealing with maybe some legislation where we want to have a subject matter expert weigh in. So it was more of a comment rather than a future agenda item. Or I guess it's a comment with regard to a potential future agenda item.
Thank you. All right, do we have any other comments from any other board members?
Just one. I like the idea of a meeting in Ventura because I could actually drive instead of fly. So I thought I would throw that one in there.
Duly noted, Mr. Kluffa.
Thank you.
All right, so if we have no other comments, we are going to move to item number 12, which is our closed session. And we are going to adjourn from closed session. So there will be no more public part of this meeting. So item number 12, closed session. Thank you, everybody, for being here today.